Chapter 27. How is it? Isn't it exciting? This is one of my favorite designs. Every time I jump down from it, I feel as if I'm young again. Of course, if you don't like it, you can use the portal next to it. There's no need to jump with me. Ansram Ruinviver tidied up his robe that was messed up by the wind, and there was no doubt that he did it on purpose. At this moment, Zhang Qing's expression was like that of a dog. He really wanted to punch the old man in the face, but considering the huge difference in strength between the two of them, he decided to swallow his anger first. Pretending to be calm, he replied, "It's fine. This little bit of provocation is nothing to me." "Really?" The little guy who jumped down with me last time was so scared that he peed his pants. The Archmage glanced between his legs meaningfully and confirmed that there were no traces of water stains. He shook his head regretfully and turned to walk along the marble road. "Well, now I finally know why your daughter ran away from home to become a pirate," Zhang Cheng muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. He would not forget that in the game, in the treasure bay at the southernmost tip of the eastern continent, there was a mission called Handsome Young Man Duncan. The person who posted it was Ansram Ruinviver's daughter, Sharp-Blade Catelyn. The young girl claimed that she liked to pursue excitement. She did not want to face moldy books and boring old mages all day, so she sneaked out of Dalaran. Originally, Zhang Cheng thought that this must be another story of rebellion where children could not understand their parents' painstaking efforts, but now his thoughts changed. He thought that this was not a **T rebellion at all, but a family inheritance. Sharp-Blade, Catelyn definitely inherited her father's genes, so she was so keen on adventure. Just as he was secretly cursing this strange father and daughter, the two of them had unknowingly walked into a domed hall. When an old mage who was busy saw them, he immediately put down the work in his hands, stood up, and bowed. "Good afternoon, Honorable Archmage. May I ask what important matter you have for a sudden visit?" "No, Charles, it's nothing too important. I just brought the young man behind me to do a test. By the way, I inform you that you can change risen status on the list for missing the dead." Ansram Ruinviver straightforwardly explained the purpose of his visit. The white-haired old man called Charles adjusted his glasses and looked up at Zhang Cheng. After a while, he nodded gently. "I understand. He is Risen's apprentice, right?" "Yes, he not only brought the news of Risen's death, but he also returned a lot of precious materials that were lost in the library." "How did you know?" the Archmage asked curiously. "It's simple. He is wearing a violet ring. I made it with my own hands, so how could I not recognize it?" After that, Charles sighed slightly, as if he was regretting the death of another young mage. "I see." Ansram Ruinviver then realized that Zhang Qing's left and right index fingers were wearing a ring that symbolized the membership of the Kirin Tor Council. He immediately said, "Come, child, take off your ring and show it to me." "As you wish." Zhang Qing knew that he had no right to refuse. He quickly took off the ring and put it in the palm of the Archmage. The Archmage lowered his head and carefully checked the inner wall of the ring, as if he was looking for something. About half a minute later, he finally found a few small words in an inconspicuous place. "I found it. As you said, one belongs to Risen, but the owner of the other ring is very interesting. Tell me, young man, where did you get this ring?" "I don't know the details, but the militia who gave it to me said that it was a trophy he got from killing a necromancer who was seriously injured." Zhang Cheng replied without thinking. "Ha ha, how ironic. Who would have thought that the traitor Damien would die in the hands of the militia he despised the most? Very good. This is the best news I've heard in recent months." Ansram Ruinviver laughed happily. "Traitor?" It was undoubtedly the first time Zhang Cheng heard this name. He looked at the old mage beside him with a puzzled expression. The latter lowered his voice and explained, "Since the destruction of Dalaran, a small group of mages who lost their loved ones and friends were eager for revenge, so they secretly carried out forbidden research. Damien was one of the best. He even gave up his identity as a living being and took a lot of precious research results to the undead. Before he left, he created a magic accident that killed 3 apprentices on the spot." "Enough. Charles, you don't have to tell these tragedies to a young man who has just set foot on the road of magic. Hurry up and do the test." I'm looking forward to his test results. Maybe you don't know, but he just killed a forgotten mage who was much stronger than him in a one-on-one arcane duel. Although it's a bit of an opportunist, it's enough to prove his intelligence and adaptability. Ansram Ruinviver said as he found a chair and sat down. There was a hint of expectation in his eyes. Oh, is that so? Now that you mention it, I'm starting to look forward to it. Charles curled his lips and pulled out a pile of books bound with silk from the table behind him that was full of messy tools and books. Here, first is the theoretical knowledge test. As long as you can answer more than 30% of the questions in here correctly, you'll pass. Staring at the heavy book that was almost as thick as a grown man's fist, Zhang Cheng suddenly felt the despair and collapse he had when he was a student who had just received the 5 years of college entrance examination, 3 years of mock papers. Who the F***CK would have thought that the Kirin Tor mage, who had always been mysterious, arrogant, and powerful, would have a written test that made one's hair stand on end? But despair was despair, and collapse was collapse. He had to do what he had to do. After borrowing a quill from the old mage, he quickly calmed down and began to answer the strange questions in the book according to the knowledge that was forcibly instilled in his mind. What surprised him was that every time he answered a question, the book would automatically judge whether it was right or wrong. This meant that he did not have any chance to check or modify it. Right was right, and wrong was wrong. Obviously, this book was an interesting magic item. Maybe even the questions were random. The person who answered the questions must have a considerable reserve of theoretical knowledge. It was absolutely impossible to pass the test by using special techniques such as highlighting the key points. As for cheating, Chapter 28. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It was not until the sun was about to set that Zhang Cheng finally finished the marathon-like written test. Exhausted, he pushed the thick and heavy book forward and let out a long sigh. Phew, I'm finally done. He could not believe that after leaving school, he would have the opportunity to relive this nightmarish scene. Haha, young man, don't be in a hurry to relax. Let me see your results. With that, Charles stretched out his right index finger and gently touched the violet mark on the cover. In an instant, the mark released a dazzling light, and in just a few seconds, it formed the image of an old human mage. The mage first bowed with one hand on his chest, and then said calmly, "There are a total of 436 questions in this test. 200 arcane questions, 100 flame questions, 70 frost questions, and the rest are application skills." The participant answered 307 of the questions correctly, far exceeding the 30% passing mark, and even exceeding the excellent level. In my records, only 12 people in the Kirin Tor Council have a better result than him, and the most recent one is Gianna Proudmoore. As the last word fell, his whole body quickly became transparent and finally completely dissipated in the air. 13th in history. This is really surprising. The old mage's eyes widened, and his face showed an expression of disbelief. After all, although the questions in the book were only basic theoretical knowledge, the scope was all-encompassing. Even a great mage could not guarantee that he could answer all the questions correctly. Therefore, for a young mage who had just been promoted from an apprentice, being able to answer 30% of the questions correctly was already a very good result. Only a very small number of excellent young mages could barely achieve a 50% accuracy rate. As for more than 50%, there were only a few in the history of Dalaran. He was not very sure whether the young man in front of him, who had never received a systematic education in Dalaran, was a rare genius. Ansram Ruinweaver was also looking up and down at Zhang Cheng. The look in his eyes was as if he had found some kind of rare animal. After a while, he smiled and asked, "Can you tell me how you did it?" "What?" Zhang Cheng suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. He shouldn't have answered all the questions correctly, so he simply chose to play dumb. Otherwise, there was no way he could explain where the large amount of knowledge and memories in his head came from. You should understand what I mean. As a young mage, your performance is a little too outstanding. First, you defeated a much stronger opponent in a one-on-one duel, and now, you displayed your theoretical knowledge. With Rayson's teaching standards, It is impossible for him to teach such an outstanding disciple. So I think he must be hiding something, right? With these words, Anselm Ruiniverver rose from his chair, his whole body exuding a suffocating magic. As the manager of the six-man council, although he was not as famous as the others, his strength could not be underestimated. Otherwise, the Dark Queen would not have allowed Dalaran to complete the reconstruction under her watch. Suppressing the fear in his heart, Zhang Cheng took a deep breath and explained in a deep voice, "Well, I admit that I hid some small secrets, but I can swear to you that Raisin is really my mentor. All the power and knowledge I have now come from him. In addition, do you think if I was a spy or had ulterior motives, would I be so high profile? Truth, this young man is not lying." Charles raised his head and glanced at the color of the arcane eye around him and quickly made a judgment. Of course, Zhang Cheng did not lie. He just told some truths skillfully and selectively. There was no doubt that whether it was the castrated mage profession template or the complex knowledge that ordinary people could not understand at all, they all originated from the dead Raisin. It was absolutely not an exaggeration to call him mentor. Strange, is my feeling wrong? Knowing that Zhang Cheng did not lie about his identity, Anselm Ruiniverver quickly put away his magic, sat down again, and lowered his head to think about something. Charles shrugged his shoulders and ignored him. Instead, he said directly to Zhang Cheng, "Well, don't worry about it. Sir Great Mage has been busy dealing with the harassment of the Forgotten recently, so it is inevitable that he is a little nervous. Next, let's carry out the second test, which is the number of spells you have mastered. Now, cast all the spells you have mastered at me, and then I will give you a score based on the number, power, and casting speed. Don't underestimate this. It will determine your position after entering the council." Understood. Zhang Cheng nodded lightly. Without any nonsense, he began to release the fireball directly. After a few hours of rest, his magic power had almost recovered, so in the blink of an eye, he smashed the hot fireball on the old mage's chest. But it was a pity that nothing happened after a flash of red light, just like how the flames struck the Forsaken Elite. Well, good power, much stronger than many low-level mages. It seems that you have already left the level of an apprentice. Maybe in a few years, there will be a young great mage in the council. Continue, don't stop, Charles commented casually. It was as if to him, the fireball just now was like a mosquito bite, which had no effect at all. At this moment, Zhang Cheng realized that the red light that flashed away was likely to be something like a protective flame barrier or a protective flame potion. After figuring this out, he immediately stopped using fire spells and switched to arcane and frost spells. When the old mage saw this, he immediately laughed and applauded. "Haha, you're a really smart guy. But unfortunately, what is protecting me now is not only the protective flame barrier, but also the protective frost, shadow, and arcane spells. With your current strength, it is impossible to break the protection. Any barrier has a corresponding upper limit. As long as the power of my spells can break the upper limit, the barrier will collapse. So, I want to try and see if I can break the protection on your body before my magic power is completely exhausted." As Zhang Cheng spoke, he gave up on arcane and frost spells and chose to use the most destructive fireball spell, which he threw forward. Since he was destined to not be able to keep a low profile, he might as well release all his power, releasing close to 20 fireballs in one go. Chapter 29. The protective flame barrier has been broken. Quite an achievement. Based on this alone, I think the following tests can be avoided. Now, say a name out loud, young man. On behalf of the Kirin Tor Council, I welcome you to join us. Charles stared at the burnt black spot on his robe, his eyes revealing undisguised surprise. Zhang Cheng, this is my name. I am very honored to be a member of Dalaran. Zhang Cheng resisted the dizziness after releasing all his mana, bent down and bowed with one hand on his chest. After all, according to the teachings in the books, when most mages perceive that there is some kind of targeted protection on the target, their first reaction is definitely to change the type of spell, just like what he did at the beginning. Due to the limitations of inertia, they rarely even think that each barrier actually has a corresponding upper limit, let alone try to break it. But for Zhang Cheng, who has played games, Everything in this world is just a series of numbers. The damage spells he released are one number, and the protective barrier is another number. When the sum of the damage of the former exceeds the latter, the barrier will naturally break. Many people mistakenly believe that water can restrain fire, but in fact, there is no such thing as restraint between the two. If the temperature of the flame is high enough and the burning range is wide enough, then no matter how much water is poured, it will only evaporate. Under a certain pressure, it can even decompose into hydrogen and oxygen to support the combustion. For the same reason, if you want to extinguish a candle, a glass of water is enough. In the end, all of the above examples are a comparison of quality and quantity. It is simple mathematics, not metaphysics or uncontrollable supernatural forces. Zhang Cheng? What a strange name. How do you spell it? Charles opened a book and asked without looking up. Forget it. I'll write it myself. Zhang Cheng sighed helplessly, took 2 steps forward, dipped the quill in his hand in ink, and wrote his name in the human language of Azeroth. In fact, according to the original plan, he originally planned to use a fake name. But considering that the other party seemed to have used an unknown method to distinguish whether he was lying or not, he decisively chose to use his real name. In any case, he was not an original resident of this world. Even if someone used this name to investigate, they would only end up with nothing. The moment the last stroke was completed, the name suddenly emitted a golden light. Then, Zhang Cheng's profile picture appeared out of thin air on the bottom page. Seeing this scene, the old mage immediately nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Now that you are a registered mage of the Kirin Tor Parliament, I will make a violet ring for you within 3 days. Tell me, what kind of magic attribute do you like to add to it? You can choose your attributes? Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. Why not? Although most mages would choose intelligence and mana recovery speed, I still had at least 12 other attributes to choose from. You can choose any 2 of them to add to the ring. Saying this, Charles flipped through the messy table and quickly found a yellowed list. Zhang Cheng took a glance at it and found that there were a series of combinations on it, including increasing the power of damage spells, adding a layer of mana shield to the wearer for a short period of time, reducing the target's magic resistance, and so on. He seriously considered for a few minutes, and finally pointed at the damage spell power and intelligence, and said, I'll choose them. No problem. Come to me in 3 days to get the ring. Oh, yes, about the other 2 violet rings on your hand. Damien's is a trophy, so I won't take it back, but Rizen's must be returned to the Parliament. We will use this ring to make a small tombstone to commemorate his life. Charles wrote down the 2 combinations while explaining his reason for taking back the violet ring. Of course, I have no objections at all. Zhang Cheng agreed without hesitation. According to Rizen's memory, Dalaran did have a tradition of using rings to make tombstones. Unless it was a traitor or committed a grave mistake, every dead mage would be given a place in a secret room called the resting place. Very good. Here, this is your temporary identity card. It allows you to access the library, and at the same time, you can get your own room in the common room, as well as free food. Other than that, if you want to use the alchemy laboratory, observatory, long-distance teleportation services, you can apply a day in advance and pay the corresponding fees according to the time. After a simple explanation of the use, the old mage quickly stuffed the button-sized violet nameplate into Zhang Cheng's hand. Then he took out a crystal from the drawer and carefully placed it on the shelf, and used a carving knife to carve a complicated pattern on it. He was so focused that he forgot that there were 2 people in the room. Zhang Cheng, who was left aside, felt a little embarrassed. He didn't know whether he should stay and wait, or turn around and leave to visit the miracle city that was still under construction. Fortunately, Ansram Ruin of Erver did not let him be embarrassed for too long. After just 3 to 5 minutes, he stood up directly from the chair and said in a slightly tired voice, Let's go. I'll take you to see your friends now. By the way, thank you for helping the merchant keep the arcane crystal. I will give you a reward later in return. You're too polite. This is what I should do. Zhang Cheng pretended to be modest in return. Hypocrite. Young man, you don't have to act in front of me. Remember, as the manager of Dalaran, I must always be vigilant against the invasion from the enemy. So, what I did just now was not directed at you, understand? Ansram Ruinaverver stared into Zhang Cheng's eyes and asked, Understood. Well, you can continue to keep your little secret as long as it doesn't endanger the council. After saying this, Ansram Ruinaverver leaned on his staff, stepped out of the dome hall, and walked along the street that was still being paved. He didn't notice that Zhang Cheng, who was following behind, secretly took out a parchment scroll with an ecstatic expression on his face. It said, Mission, the apprentice's trial is completed. Talent is unlocked. You have gained 17 talent points. 17 talent points. According to the first talent point obtained at level 10 in the game, his current profession level should be 26. Chapter 30. For the choice of talent, Zhang Cheng had already thought about it carefully and made his own choice. First of all, strengthening Frost Arrow by 5 points could shorten the casting time. As the main damage skill of Frost spells, it was indispensable. Secondly, the 3 points of Bone-Piercing Chill had a high chance of freezing the target in place when casting Frost spells. It was also very important to create a favorable casting environment for the mage. Third, the 5 points of Ice Shards and the 3 points of Bone-Piercing Chill. The former could trigger the resonance of Frost spells, which was often said in the game. After a fatal blow, it would trigger an explosion of broken ice, causing secondary damage to the target. The latter could make the spellcaster more closely connected with the frost energy, increasing the power of all frost spells. When the two were combined, the power exerted was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Finally, the rapid cooling point could allow the caster to complete the control of their own body in an instant, calming down some of the magic turbulence that took a long time to calm down. According to the description in the book, Basic Principles of Magic, every time a mage completed a spell, they needed a period of time to calm down the magic turbulence around them. Some of them took a long time, while some were shorter. In the game, this was reflected in the cooldown time. However, the invention of the rapid cooling skill allowed the mages to complete self-control in an instant after casting a frost spell, especially when paired with the ice barrier and ice protection behind the ice talent tree. It was simply the best choice to save one's life. Any ice mage would not give up on such a godly skill like rapid cooldown. Feeling the unknown power instilling the corresponding knowledge into his brain, Zhang Cheng secretly breathed a sigh of relief. From now on, his profession template was no longer incomplete. Coupled with the knowledge he had learned in the past few days, even if he immediately returned to the earth full of mysterious creatures and supernatural forces, he would be able to protect himself. Of course, since the parchment did not intend to send him back for the time being, his journey in Azeroth was far from over. He could still use his convenient identity as a mage of the Kirin Tor Parliament to seek more benefits. Just as he lowered his head and silently thought about what valuable things he should get, Anslam Ruinviver suddenly stopped, pointed to the hotel not far away, and said, Go, your friend is staying there. I have to go to the alchemy laboratory to test the composition of these new plagues, so I won't accompany you. Remember, don't run around for the next few days. If the situation is urgent, I will ask you to attend important meetings at any time. Don't worry, I plan to spend the next few days in the library to look up some information and take some time to practice concocting magical potions. I won't take a step out of Dalaran, Zhang Cheng promised without hesitation. Was this a joke? It wasn't easy to come to Azeroth's capital of magic. Only a fool would be willing to leave. Oh, you know alchemy? The great Taoist master was surprised. I've roughly learned a few of them. Currently, I can only make Junior Healing, Lion King Strength, Junior Defense, Junior Mana, Lesser Troll Blood, Junior Agility, Junior Endurance, and a few other limited recipes. Zhang Cheng casually mentioned a few of the recipes he knew. According to the game's definition of professional skills, his current alchemy level should be around 50 proficiency. That's right. Practice more. Alchemists will always be scarce. If there's a need, you can sell your own potions to the council. We have a list of prices. When you go to get the Violet Ring, you can ask Charles for a copy. That's all for today. Goodbye. After that, Anslam Ruinviver tapped the ground with his staff and instantly opened a portal to an unknown place. He stepped over and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Magic teleportation. It's really a convenient ability, Zhang Cheng whispered with some envy, then walked into the inn called Home of Heroes. As soon as he entered the door, he saw old George sitting very relaxed near the bar counter, gulping down a cup of unknown dark purple liquid. Sitting beside him was little Jenny. This underage girl was sipping her soup while looking around curiously. Perhaps to her, who was at the age where her curiosity was at its peak, everything about Dalaran was so mysterious and inconceivable. As for the injured Garrick, he was sitting alone against the wall in the corner. From time to time, he covered his shoulder and grimaced. The skin near his shoulder was also greenish-purple, which looked quite bad. The rest of the guests in the hall seemed to have long been accustomed to the appearance of strangers. They were still sitting together in twos and threes. Some of them were wearing robes. They were obviously mages. Some were wearing armor and robes with the Kirin Tor symbol. They were most likely the patrol guards responsible for the periphery of Dalaran. Obviously, the arrival of Zhang Cheng did not attract anyone's attention, so he walked through the aisle and sat directly next to the merchant. He greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, old George. How is it? Have you delivered your precious goods safely?" Oh, holy light above. Mr. Mage, I'm so glad to see you." The merchant was obviously a little drunk. He waved his arms and shouted at the midget waitress not far away. "Iggy, give the gentleman next to me a glass of your best wine. It's my treat." Okay. Don't rush me. Can't a big guy like you be considerate of small people like us?" The cute little midget grumbled as she ran to the bartender's side and brought the wine to the bar counter. "Thank you." Zhang Cheng thanked her politely and looked at her with interest. In his impression, if Azeroth had to pick the two most representative races, it would be the goblins and the midgets. The reason why he said this was not because these two races were full of idiots, but because they had pushed the development of the entire world's technology. They had forcibly led a world that was dominated by magic to a world where technology and magic were equally divided. It was said that if it were not for the fact that the midgets were too few in number, their thinking was too jumpy, and they often dug holes for themselves, they would definitely have the strength to build a powerful empire. The midget waitress called Iggy undoubtedly also noticed that someone was observing her. She immediately stood on her tiptoes and asked, "Hey, big guy, what's wrong with me?" "Nothing, I just rarely see midgets, so I'm a little curious." Zhang Cheng took a small sip of the wine in his glass and shook his head with a smile. "Huh, curious? Your excuse sucks. I bet you're waiting to hear me say, 'Oh my God, you're so tall,' right?" Iggy angrily waved her little fists. "No, I swear, I definitely don't have such thoughts." Although the opponent's fists were not threatening, Zhang Cheng hurriedly explained. He did not want to have a physical confrontation with a little guy who was not even as tall as his, but in front of countless pairs of eyes. Chapter 31. Watching the hot-tempered midget waitress being dragged away, Zhang Cheng turned around with a puzzled expression and asked, "What's going on? She seems to be sensitive about her height." Ha ha. It all started when Iggy became the hostess of this inn. Back then, she had just crossed the wetlands and followed the caravan to Dalaran. She would often repeat the catchphrase of the dwarves. Many people thought it was funny and deliberately teased her to repeat it. In the end, it made her a little annoyed. But don't worry, she'll forget about it after a while. After all, the reason why dwarves are so likable is that they don't hold grudges. They can be angry one second and be happy the next. Old George explained with a laugh. "Well, it seems like I've suffered an undeserved disaster." Zhang Cheng shrugged helplessly. He finally understood why he had caused such a strong reaction when he just looked at her a few more times. Forget about her. Come, let's celebrate our safe arrival in Dalaran. Cheers, Old George said as he raised his glass and clinked it lightly. Then, he raised his head and gulped down the entire glass of wine. Because he drank too quickly, he choked on the last sip. His face was red and he kept coughing, but his eyes revealed undisguised excitement and joy. Obviously, the safe arrival of the arcane crystal had earned him a handsome reward and a series of benefits. Zhang Cheng sharply noticed this. He immediately lowered his voice and asked, I'm a little curious. How much did you earn from this trip? You didn't hesitate to risk your life to secretly deliver something as precious as the arcane crystal? Old George licked his lips and extended 5 fingers in a very subtle way. 500 gold coins made by the magic kingdom of Dalaran. And this is just the reward in cash. Apart from that, I also receive the right to purchase alchemy potions, magic materials, and equipment from the Kirin Tor Council. When I return to South Shore, I'll exchange all the money for goods and ship them to Menethil Port. I can at least make 3 times the profit. When it came to business, he immediately went into the role of a merchant and began to talk about his method of making money. After all, reality was not a game where players could repeatedly kill monsters in the wild in exchange for an inexhaustible amount of money. 500 gold coins made by Dalaran was an unimaginable amount of money for an ordinary citizen of Azeroth. It was enough to buy a medium-sized manor with an area of more than 400 hectares in the Stormwind Kingdom. It was also enough to buy 2 armed merchant ships equipped with cannons. It was also enough to let someone not have to work anymore and live a life of drunkenness all day long. I see. Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. With such a high return, even he had the urge to do it, let alone a businessman who was only after profits. Of course, not just anyone could transport arcane crystals. Just the purchase of arcane crystals would cost a lot of money, and one would also need to have a good relationship with the dwarves who were good at mining. Otherwise, one might be able to buy arcane crystals even if they had the money. Mr. Mage, I'm not a person who's good with words, and I don't want to say too many words of gratitude, because simple gratitude is not enough to express your efforts. Here, this is a small gift. Please accept it. A piece of paper filled with tiny words suddenly appeared in Old George's hand. He gently placed it on the table and pushed it over. This is... Zhang Cheng roughly glanced at it and immediately realized that it was a deed. To be exact, it was a deed for a house located in the center of Dalaran. Whoever had this deed would have the ownership of the house and the surrounding land. Perhaps the outside world did not know the value of this deed, but he knew very well that once Dalaran was built and flew into the sky, its value would immediately skyrocket by more than 10 times. However, as a passerby who was destined to leave, even the most valuable property would not be of much use to him. Old George obviously did not know this, and rather proudly explained, as you can see, this is a property. Although the Kirin Tor Council provides every member with free accommodation and food, I feel that a powerful mage like you deserves better. Moreover, I have specially purchased a series of tools for you, so you can complete a lot of work without leaving the house. Haha, you really put in a lot of effort. But I have a small question. What is your purpose in doing this? Or rather, what do you want from me? Don't say that you are doing this to thank me. You are a merchant, and a merchant's nature is to pursue profit. They will never invest in someone who has lost their value. Don't you think so? Zhang Cheng gently tapped on the deed with the violet symbol and looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. He was not a greedy fool and would not ignore the hidden dangers and risks behind seeing benefits. Ha ha! All right, your eyes are as sharp as a torch. Nothing can be hidden from you. Simply put, I hope to cooperate with you. Old George did not have the slightest intention of hiding anything and openly admitted his intentions. Cooperation? In what way? Zhang Cheng did not directly reject him. Instead, he showed a rather interested expression. He really wanted to know what kind of ambition this ordinary old man, who looked to be in his 50s or 60s, was hiding. Old George pondered for a moment, glanced at the little daughter sitting next to him, and said in a low voice, First, I hope you can help take care of Jenny. Just a few hours ago, Master Anselm Rinoverver had agreed to let her stay in Dalaran and learn magic knowledge with the other apprentices. I was afraid that she would be bullied by the older apprentices if she was alone. As far as I know, the competition between apprentices is very fierce. Sometimes, in order to fight for a higher position, they will not hesitate to use despicable means such as poisoning. If you can let her stay with you, then the other apprentices should have some scruples. Sorry, I am afraid I will have to disappoint you. I am not the kind of person who likes to stay in one place for a long time. It will not be long before I leave Dalaran, so I can't help you take care of your daughter." Hearing the merchant's request, Zhang Qing chose to refuse without hesitation. Even he himself did not know if he would suddenly be brought back by a mysterious parchment scroll in the next second. Naturally, he could not take on the long-term responsibility of taking care of someone's daughter while traveling. However, old George did not seem to give up and continued to explain, "Sir, I just hope to use your reputation to give Jenny a little protection. It doesn't matter even if she leaves Dalaran in the future. As long as Jenny stays in your house, then no apprentice will dare to harm her." "Well, since you have said so, it would be a bit unreasonable of me to still disagree." "Okay, I agree to your request." Zhang Cheng pretended to agree reluctantly. Chapter 32. Thank you very much. Perhaps you don't understand why a merchant like me would want my children to become mages. But I can tell you that this is a shortcut to changing the fate of my family. As a merchant, I am very rich, but I am always looked down upon by those high and mighty nobles. Even a noble who is so poor that he can't even afford to eat can confidently ask me to pay my respects to him, just because he has a noble bloodline. To tell you the truth, I desire to change the status of my family and myself. I desire to gain the respect of others, especially those nobles. But it is very difficult to achieve this. There are usually only two ways. One is to become a noble through military service, and the other is to become a noble mage. Unfortunately, none of my children have the potential to become warriors, priests, or paladins, so this path is not feasible. Even if they have the talent, I don't want them to risk their lives to fight those damn orcs, gnolls, kobolds, trolls, and undead. Only my youngest daughter, Jenny, has shown extraordinary intelligence at a young age. Other children need a few years to learn to read and write, but she did it in only 4 months. I have always believed that she will be the one to change the fate of my family. For this, I am willing to give up everything I have." After saying this, old George put down his wine glass, stood up, and bowed respectfully. At the same time, he asked Jenny to stand up and bow as well. Although the girl did not understand her father's good intentions, she still put down her bowl of soup and said thank you in a small voice. Change fate. Zhang Qing looked at the merchant, who had a strong sense of unwillingness in his eyes, and suddenly understood something. As mentioned before, Azeroth's human society was a typical feudal society. The nobles were the ones who held power at the top of the pyramid. Although merchants were rich, their social status was far inferior to the nobles. They even had to accept various forms of exploitation and oppression. The most typical example was when Stormwind City owed the Stonemasons Association their remuneration. In the end, the latter could not bear it and chose to launch an armed uprising to protect their own interests. If they treated their own people like this, then it was not hard to imagine how they treated the merchants who walked between the cities and countries. Perhaps only by building an armed corporation like the goblins could those who were eyeing the merchants' wealth restrain themselves. What should I do if I have money, but no sense of security? The answer was simple. He used money to change his social class and become one of the rulers. After thinking this through, Zhang Qing couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He sighed softly and said, "You've made a decision, a dangerous decision. One had to go through countless tests and temptations to become a mage from an apprentice. It was not much safer than becoming an alliance soldier, and it might even be more dangerous. It did not mean that just being smart was enough. Due to the frequent use of magic, the spatial barrier around Dalaran was far more fragile than other places. This also meant that the Burning Legion's demons, void beings, and some indescribable evil forces could extend their tentacles at any time and affect a certain mage or apprentice. Are you sure you want to leave your daughter in a place like this, just for a chance to become a mage? In fact, if it were not for the fact that the parchment scroll gave him a simple profession template and a large amount of magic knowledge, he was not sure if he would be able to survive the dangerous apprenticeship. That's right. It is because we are lowly that we pursue greatness. It is because we are short that we pursue eternity. It is because we are as weak as ants that we pursue godlike power. Didn't the human mages in the past continuously research and learn in such an atmosphere before finally surpassing the highborn elves and establishing the status of the Dalaran magic kingdom? Now, I'm also willing to use little Jenny to gamble on the future and fate of the family, old George replied firmly. All right, I hope you won't regret the decision you've made. Now, let's continue. What else do you want to work with me on? Seeing that the other party had made up his mind, Zhang Cheng decisively chose to change the topic. Never engaging in pointless arguments with others was one of the few good points he had, because when he was very young, he understood a principle, which was to never try to persuade others with words, especially a person with a complete outlook on life and values. Only cruel reality and failure could make a person change himself. Old George hesitated for a moment and quickly said, I want to ask for your help to see if you can strive to purchase more alchemy potions, especially healing potions. Whether it's Stormwind City in the south, Refuge Valley in the Earthy Highlands, or South Shore Town, they're all facing various threats. In order to protect the lives of the experienced veterans, many commanders have given them 2 bottles when they are out on dangerous missions. The consumption is very fast, so there's a serious shortage. So, you want to take the opportunity to make a fortune? No, making money is not my goal. My goal is to see if I can find a few reliable warriors to protect my caravan. As the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. Old George was probably no longer willing to trust the temporarily hired guards after being infiltrated by the syndicate spies. He actually thought of the military. Hee, you've asked the right person this time. I happen to know a little alchemy. As long as you can get the peace bloom and silver leaf, I can make a batch of primary healing potions in a few days. How about it? Are you interested? Zhang Cheng asked with a smile. What? You know alchemy? That's great. No problem. I'll go borrow a batch from an acquaintance now. Also, if you need any other herbs, please make a list and I'll do my best to collect them. As for the price, I promise it will be 3 times the price of the Kirin Tor Council. Old George excitedly offered his conditions. Zhang Cheng didn't even think about it and directly nodded in agreement. Okay, I accept your offer. In addition to peace bloom and silverleaf, I also need some earthroot and swiftgrass. Also, if it's convenient, give me some herb seeds. Obviously, the reason why he agreed so quickly was not for the money, but to prepare for his departure. After all, the ingredients for the alchemy formula were all produced in Azeroth. Once he returned to Earth and lost the ingredients, the alchemy profession would be useless unless he could bring the seeds back and cultivate them artificially. Seeds? You plan to cultivate them artificially? Yes. Is there a problem? Old George hurriedly waved his hand. No, there's no problem. As far as I know, only the druids seem to know how to cultivate herbs. I need to spend some time to ask around. Chapter 33. Seeing that someone was approaching him, Garrick immediately struggled to stand up. However, the intense pain made it impossible for him to maintain his balance. After a few attempts, he finally sat back down helplessly and said bitterly, Well, I think I'm half disabled now. According to the description of the lady who examined my wounds, I won't be able to fight or do any heavy physical work for at least half a month. If the curse can't be completely purified, then amputation will be the only thing waiting for me. Amputation? That's serious? Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. Although he had expected that the black arrow shot by the Forgotten Elite was definitely not ordinary, he never thought that it would be so serious as to require amputation. After all, this was the magic kingdom of Dalaran. If even the mages of the Kirin Tor Council couldn't do anything about it, then the progress of the curse research of the Forgotten Ones was a little too terrifying. It's just a possibility. The specifics will depend on the recovery of the next week or so. In addition, she also recommended a strong dispelling potion for curses, but a small bottle costs 70 silver coins. How can I afford it? Garrick explained with a sigh. As a young farmer and militia in a small rural area, the thing he had seen the most in his life was dirty copper coins. He only received a few silver coins when he received his salary. As for the gold coins of Lord Darren with the face of Tarina's Menethil II, he had never even seen one in his life. Ha ha, relax. Any problem that can be solved with money is not a problem. Here, I have some money here. Take it and heal your wounds first. Knowing that the other party's curse was not a technical problem, but a lack of money, Zhang Cheng laughed and took out a few gold coins from his pocket and stuffed it into the other party's hand. He had just received Ri Thin's inheritance not long ago. Just the gold and silver coins alone filled an entire leather bag. There were hundreds of them, so he was not short of money at all. At least when he was in Azeroth, he did not need to worry about money for the time being. No, no, no. How can this be? Feeling the cold touch from his palm, Garrick pushed the gold coins back with a red face. Perhaps it was his pride, or perhaps it was because he was embarrassed. In short, this young man of about 20 years old seemed to be mentally resistant to accepting gifts from others. All right, cut the crap. Just take it. Remember, recover as soon as possible. Perhaps it won't be long before we return to town and solve the plague problem. Without any explanation, Zhang Cheng stuffed the money into the man's pocket and turned to leave the home of heroes. He was also very young. He understood that people in their teens and 20s often made stupid mistakes. Sometimes, they even valued their dignity more than their lives. Only when the consequences were irreparable would they begin to regret it. Standing on the empty street of Dalaran, a staff embedded with a fiery red crystal had appeared in Zhang Cheng's hand at some point in time. Without a doubt, this was the reward for the Merchant's Ambition mission. It was the famous flint staff from the Death Mines dungeon in the game. But what he didn't understand was how this thing was delivered to him, and why he didn't notice it at all. Just as he lowered his head and repeatedly wondered if he had missed any details, a portal suddenly appeared in front of him. In less than a second, an irresistible suction dragged him in. Darkness, starlight, and colorful vortexes. Before he could figure out what was going on, he appeared in the center of a round table with 6 chairs. He saw that 4 of the 6 chairs were empty, and only 2 chairs were occupied. One of them was Archmage Anselm Ruinvawal, and the other was a beautiful woman with long blonde hair. Although she looked very young, her whole body exuded a surge of magic, as if she was completely integrated with the water element. Coupled with a pair of eyes full of wisdom, it was believed that no matter where she went, she would be the focus of attention. Your Excellency Archmage, why did you summon me so soon? Is there anything important? Zhang Cheng pretended to be innocent and carefully probed. Anselm Ruinvawal glanced at the woman sitting opposite him and nodded gently. Yes, I need you to explain your views on the research of the new magic plague by the Forsaken, so that some people with illusions understand that there is no such thing as peace between us and the tribe. At least they have no intention of coexisting with us. Young mage, please don't care about Ruinvawal's words. You just have to say what you know. I always believe that the orcs are not monsters. They have the right to survive in this world, just like us. The woman suddenly interrupted. You are? Zhang Cheng turned sideways and showed a puzzled expression to the woman. Gianna Proudmoore. The woman smiled and reported her name. Boom! Zhang Cheng's head fell as if it had been hit by a hammer. He couldn't believe that he would see the savior of the human world of Azeroth so soon. She was known as the most outstanding magic genius in hundreds of years, the ex-girlfriend of the Lich King Arthas, and the heroine who made the Blood Elf Prince Kale, that Sunstrider-obsessed Gianna Proudmoore. For a moment, he forgot what to say and was stunned in place. However, Gianna seemed to have long been used to similar situations. She crossed her hands and held her chin. She said in a slightly playful tone, Why? Have you forgotten how to speak the common language? It doesn't matter. You can speak the Darnassus language of the High Elves. You know, I'm proficient in 9 languages. Oh, you really know how to joke. I'm just a little surprised that I actually appeared in Dalaran. Zhang Cheng, who came back to his senses, quickly smiled and bowed. I can't help it. In order to maintain the fragile peace between the Horde and the Alliance, I have to often travel between the eastern and western continents. Gianna shrugged helplessly. Then her face suddenly became serious. By the way, I heard that you found that the Forsaken are experimenting with a new plague on living people. Is this true? It's true. I even brought back samples. They use Terran Mill as a stronghold and are constantly launching raids on the farms in the surrounding areas. They even try to cut off the farms from the outside world. If you don't believe me, you can go and see for yourself. Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. Damn it! How could this be? How could Sar allow such a thing to happen? Gianna suddenly stood up and slammed her fist on the table. Chapter 34. Oh, I once fought side by side with the Horde against the invasion of the Burning Legion. Now you actually say that I don't understand them? Jaina raised her eyebrows, and there was a trace of displeasure in her eyes. After all, since she joined forces with the orcs to kill her father, Admiral Dai Lin, her lifelong wish was to maintain the peace between the Horde and the Alliance. Now someone said that she didn't understand the Horde at all, so she was naturally not too happy. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders indifferently and retorted calmly, "You think you understand the Horde? Then let me ask you, do you know the social structure of the Horde? Do you understand their economic situation? Do you know what the orcs, the main component of the Horde, desire the most in their hearts?" Jaina suddenly found that she couldn't even answer a question, and she frowned speechlessly. Look, although you fought side by side with the Horde, you didn't really have a deep understanding of them. In fact, the only one you really understand is Great Chief Thrall alone. But don't forget that Great Chieftain Sar was raised by humans and received the education and values of human society. Even his aesthetic standards were more inclined towards humans and not the boorish beastmen. To some extent, he has more wisdom and humanity than many humans. Zhang Cheng stood in the middle of the round table and spoke with assurance. Just a few seconds ago, he finally realized the purpose of Ansram Riniverver hurriedly summoning him over. It was very simple. The Archmage and Jaina represented the two attitudes of the Kirin Tor Council. The former insisted that Dalaran was a part of the Alliance and should help the Alliance fight against the Horde, but the latter hoped that Dalaran could remain neutral and not add fuel to the fire in an already tense situation. Since neither side could convince the other, evidence became very important. Ansram Riniverver hoped to use the matter of the Forgotten Ones creating a new plague to attack Jaina's self-confidence and make her give up her unrealistic fantasies. Zhang Cheng never minded being used as a tool as long as he could get enough compensation afterwards. What's more, Jaina was not a narrow-minded person. The risk of contradicting her was almost negligible. There were benefits and no risks. Anyone with a little brain would know how to choose. So what are you trying to say? Jaina urged impatiently. Zhang Cheng smiled and quickly replied, "What I want to express is that Sal can't represent the true orcs, much less the entire tribe. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to understand the tribe, you need to understand their social structure, economic situation, as well as their innermost desires. First of all, in terms of social structure, the tribes were typically independent. Every clan had relatively independent political and military rights, and even the great chief could not interfere at will. This meant that if one or two chiefs wanted to start a war, they could ignore Orgrimmar's orders and lead their own tribes to attack. Secondly, I'm sure you know that the orcs still maintain a primitive and barbaric slavery system. They force some of their clansmen who are not good at fighting to do manual labor. They are responsible for cutting trees, gathering food, building fortifications, and other physical labor. If they treated their own kind like this, then they would be even more cruel and heartless to outsiders. They even asked the foreign slaves to kill each other in the arena, using naked death to satisfy their inner thirst for blood and violence. Let me ask you, if such a race lost a leader like Great Chief Sal and was replaced by someone who grew up in an orc tribe, do you think they would be willing to maintain peace? Finally, and most importantly, every orc subconsciously has two important things: power and glory. The current Great Chief Sal is leading them to glory. But if a great chief who worships power was replaced, what would the result be like? Don't forget that the founder of the Shadow Council, Gul'dan, was an orc who worshipped power. Similarly, Grom Hellscream, who drank the demon's blood, was also an orc who worshipped power. Think about it. What did the orcs do under their leadership? After saying this, Zhang Cheng stood patiently, waiting for the other party to slowly digest the content. In his opinion, Jaina, who was known as the savior of mankind, was essentially no different from Arthas. Even their experiences were surprisingly similar. One killed her own father with her own hands, while the other watched the orcs kill her own father. It was no wonder that both of them ended up in tragedy. He could not understand at all how high a person's awareness had to be to allow others to kill their own father. Anselm Renevel was undoubtedly very satisfied with the views expressed in the remarks. His face showed undisguised approval. He stood up directly and hung a pendant with a charming halo around Zhang Cheng's neck in front of Jaina. "Well said, young man. You're not like some people who have forgotten their origin and race. Remember, Dalaran will always be a member of the Alliance. No one can change this. This is arcane crystal." Feeling the power contained in the pendant, Zhang Cheng widened his eyes in surprise. "That's right. Isn't the purpose of the arcane crystal to serve the mage?" Anselm Runevel blinked very obscurely. "Thank you for your generosity." Zhang Cheng hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Through the hint of the great mage, he immediately realized that the pendant hanging around his neck was his reward for saving old George's box of arcane crystals. So he put it away with a clear conscience. While the two were talking, Jaina fell into unprecedented irritation and uneasiness. She knew very well that everything Zhang Cheng said was true, especially after recalling the crazy behavior of Grom Gore Hellscream. She felt more and more that the orcs were not as easy to get along with as she had thought. She could not guarantee that once Thrall was gone, the new chieftain would choose to maintain peace. After all, even a fool knew how warlike the orcs were. Even in the face of the endless demon army, they never showed the slightest fear. For the orcs, dying in battle was the most glorious way to die. Lying in bed and dying of illness was a shame and sorrow. For a moment, Jaina was in a contradictory situation. After a full minute, she raised her head and asked, "Is there no possibility of peaceful coexistence between the Alliance and the Horde? Must one side completely destroy the other?" Chapter 35. Stance? Can you explain it in detail? Jaina finally put away her previous contempt and changed into a rather sincere attitude. After the conversation, she finally realized that the young man standing in front of her was not the kind of mage who shut himself in a tower all day long. Instead, he was a mature person who had a unique view of the current situation. She never minded humbly asking for advice from such a person. It was obvious that when such a powerful and beautiful woman with such a reputation took the initiative to lower herself, it would often give men an indescribable feeling. At least Zhang Cheng felt that his self-esteem was greatly satisfied. He explained with a smile, "Stance is simply the perspective of things. The conflict between the Alliance and the Horde is essentially the conflict between humans and orcs. From the perspective of humans, the orcs are invaders from another world, the claws and teeth of the Burning Legion, and the executioners who killed their own family and friends. Therefore, there is no need for any reason to hate them. If possible, it is best to kill them all and not leave any future trouble. But from a perspective of the orcs, they think of themselves as victims. First, they were deceived by the demons to start a wrong war, and then they destroyed the home they relied on to survive. Therefore, they needed a new land to start a new life. But the Alliance saw them as monsters, obstructing them everywhere and even trying to lock them up in shelters as slaves. It was precisely because both sides stood in their own positions and never tried to think from another perspective that deep-rooted prejudice and hatred formed over time. Humans thought the orcs were crude, ugly, cruel, and bloodthirsty. The orcs thought humans were despicable, cunning, and cowardly, and only knew how to rely on numbers. There was once a wise man who said that there are some doors in the world that once opened can never be closed again. Hatred and prejudice are one of them. Perhaps your intentions are good, and you hope that the Alliance and the Horde can live in peace. But because of the existence of hatred and prejudice, neither side will truly trust the other. When a sensitive matter occurs at a sensitive time, the hidden conflict will instantly erupt and evolve into a war. Although it is a little rude to say this, I still have to say that your approach is a little too idealistic. Jaina was not angry at being refuted in front of her face. Instead, she flipped her long blonde hair and stood up to bow. "Thank you very much for your novel point of view. Now I finally understand what the problem between the Horde and the Alliance is. At the same time, I also believe that as long as we persevere, the hatred will slowly dissolve with the passage of time. Humans, dwarves, gnomes, elves, orcs, trolls, and taurens can all live together on this land. Whether it was intentional or not, she had purposely excluded the Forsaken from a list. However, the observant Zhang Cheng noticed this and asked meaningfully, "What about the Forgotten One?" "I don't know much about the Forgotten Ones. All I know is that the one leading them is Sylvanas, the former Ranger General of Silvermoon City. She was a hero who fought against the invasion of the Calamity, so I don't want to comment too much. But if they really are secretly researching the magic plague, I swear I won't sit back and do nothing." With that, Gianna grabbed the cloak on the empty chair beside her, pushed open the door, and walked down the red-carpeted corridor. Ansram Runeverver shouted at her back, "Proudmoore, are you going to Stormwind City?" "Yes. I want to talk to Varian, and if the situation permits, I'm going to arrange for him to meet with Thrall. I think that after great leaders like them meet, they will definitely become friends, not enemies." Gianna spoke of her plan without looking back. When Zhang Cheng heard this, it was as if someone had cast a spell on him, and his entire body froze in place. He suddenly realized that what was going to happen next was the disappearance of the famous king of Stormwind City. King Varian Wrynn would be split into two different personalities under the control of the mastermind behind the scenes. After going through all kinds of hardships, he would finally regain the throne. Staring at Gianna's gradually disappearing figure, he could not help but sigh in a low voice. "It's incredible that I happened to catch up with the gradually opening of the era." "What are you muttering about?" Ansram Runeverver waved his staff and tapped the ground lightly. "No, nothing. I'm just a little emotional. As the hero of the resistance against the Burning Legion, Lady Proudmoore is an idealist who can't see the situation clearly." Zhang Cheng pretended to be rather regretful and sighed. "It's more than idealism. She's almost forgotten that she's a human. It's not the orcs who raised her and taught her to be a mage, but the Alliance." At the mention of Gianna, the Archmage suddenly became angry. But soon he controlled his temper, turned around, and threw a slightly shabby notebook over. "Here, take it. This is a book that records the techniques of summoning and controlling elements. Remember to return it to the library after 3 days." Summoning and controlling elements? Zhang Cheng's eyes lit up slightly, and he quickly opened it and flipped through it quickly. From the moment he entered Dalaran, he noticed that many mages had the ability to summon and control elements. Although the summoning of the water element was not released until the level 70 version of the game, in the real world, summoning and controlling elements was no secret to the mages. However, if he wanted to learn the relevant skills, he had to make a certain contribution to the Kirin Tor Council. "Well, go back and study it slowly. You're not needed here." Ansram Runeverver waved his hand and instantly opened a portal. Before Zhang Cheng could react, he was back on the street in front of the hotel. The passers-by seemed to have been used to the sudden appearance and disappearance of the mages. They smiled and nodded, and then continued to do their own things. As it was already evening, the magic light sources located in the protective shield were all lit up. At a glance, there were colorful lights, making people feel like they were in a dream. But Zhang Cheng's mind was completely occupied by the notebook in his arms. He was not in the mood to enjoy the beautiful scenery. After a simple identification of the direction, he went straight to the address marked on the deed. He couldn't wait to try to summon an elemental creature and make it obey his will. After all, mages were different from shamans. The latter asked the elements to help him as a friend, but the former ordered the elements as a master. Chapter 36. 3 days wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. In order to fully grasp the ability to summon and control the elements within the time limit, Zhang Cheng once again entered an unprecedented state of concentration. No food, no water, no sleep. Even going to the toilet and cleaning himself, he spent his days in the sturdy basement of the house, conducting theoretical research and practice. He was like a hungry sponge, crazily absorbing all kinds of knowledge from the notes. Even if there were a few times when his arm was almost broken by the violent earth elemental, he did not retreat at all. Instead, he gained a lot of experience from it. Every time he summoned, there was obvious improvement. In just 2 days, he was able to control the elements he summoned for more than a minute. The only problem was that as the control time increased, every time he gave an order, the resistance of the elements would increase exponentially. The stronger the element was, the faster it would break free. According to the description in the notes, the best solution was to lure an element out of its world and then imprison it in a soul gem. This way, when the mage summoned again, it would be the same element. And because the connection with the elemental world was cut off, the element would no longer be able to gain power from it. Naturally, it would be impossible for it to break free. But the downside was that, as the summoner, the mage had to use his own magic to provide energy for the element. After considering the pros and cons, Zhang Cheng decisively chose to accept the suggestions given in the notes. He was prepared to capture fire, water, earth, and wind elements respectively. After all, he had to leave this world sooner or later. When he returned, who knew if there would be any elemental life forms? So it was better to be safe in advance. Just do it. Luring the elements was not an easy task. First, he had to get something that they could not refuse. For example, the essence of water, air, earth, and fire that could increase the power of the elements. Second, in order to prevent the elements from escaping, an imprisonment spell was also necessary. Third, and most importantly, the mage had to know the name of the summoned element, or else he would not be able to complete the imprisonment ritual. Because there were too many things needed, Zhang Cheng directly bought a full set of materials from the Kirin Tor Council at a high price, spending a total of 50 gold coins. Following that, he hired 3 advanced apprentices to help him complete the imprisonment spell in the basement. Finally, he flipped through the ancient books in the library and copied down the names of 4 elements that were on par with his strength. By the time all the preparations were done, it was already a week later. During this time, he also took the time to concoct a large batch of beginner healing potions. There were at least 1,000 bottles. As one of the most basic magic potions in alchemy, there were actually very few ingredients for the beginner healing potion. Only silver leaf grass and peace bloom were needed. The process was even simpler. The temperature of the solution was maintained, and the chopped herbs were slowly added. When the color of the potion turned red, a spell was cast to activate it. Perhaps in the game, no matter what kind of potion it was, it had to be concocted 1 bottle at a time. However, in reality, it was completely possible to enlarge the container and the amount of herbs used to concoct a large pot in one go before finally pouring it into the bottle. Of course, not everyone could use this method, especially the control of the concentration of the herbs and the temperature of the solution. The slightest mistake could lead to disastrous consequences. The reason why Zhang Cheng dared to do this was because of the knowledge and experience instilled in his mind. He didn't even need to think or calculate. Just by looking at the temperature of the solution, he could tell whether there was more silverleaf grass or more peace bloom. The merchant who had just rushed back to Dalaran happened to see the mountain of potion bottles in the house. He was in ecstasy and shouted excitedly, "Holy light! My holy light! This is unbelievable! I've only been away for a week, and you've already concocted so many beginner healing potions? Don't be so excited, dear old George. They're only the most basic beginner healing potions. They can't be like the high-level beginner healing potions, which can heal wounds in just a few seconds. At most, they can pull the seriously injured back from the brink of death." Zhang Cheng rubbed his dry eyes, an exhausted expression appearing on his face. Early on, when the first bottle of beginner healing potion was made, he couldn't wait to buy a few rabbits to test its effects. He found out that the biggest use of this thing was to stop bleeding. No matter how serious the internal and external injuries were, as long as a bottle was used, the bleeding would immediately stop. As for when it would heal and recover, that depended on the patient constitution. No, 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 you don't understand. What the army needs is this kind of beginner healing potion that is cheap and can save lives at critical moments. Generally speaking, every organized army is usually equipped with a priest or doctor who is responsible for treating the wounded. As long as the soldiers are still alive after the battle, they can be cured very quickly. Old George took out the dagger that he always carried with him, as he explained. He lightly cut his wrist, and scarlet blood instantly flowed out from the cut on his skin, dripping along his finger and onto the ground. Without any hesitation, he quickly pulled out the cork and drank one of the potions. In less than 3 to 5 seconds, the wound immediately stopped bleeding and slowly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, only a shallow scar was left. Excellent. There's no problem with the potion's effect at all. May I be so bold as to ask, how did you do it? As far as I know, most alchemists who can concoct 50 bottles of potions a day are already very impressive. But compared to you, they're simply like crawling snails. Old George's eyes flashed with greed as he carefully probed. As a businessman who pursued profits, he now looked at Zhang Cheng as if he was looking at an inexhaustible gold mine. Hee, I'm sorry, this is my little secret. In addition, I also hope that you can keep it secret. Is that okay? Zhang Cheng asked with a smile that was not a smile. Understood. I swear that I will definitely keep this secret for you. Old George nodded vigorously without hesitation, and at the same time said in an embarrassed tone, In addition, I have a small request. Since you have concocted so many beginner healing potions at once, I don't have enough cash on hand at the moment. I wonder if I can put it on credit first, or use other goods to pay for it. Sure. Tell me, how much do you intend to put on credit, and what do you intend to use to pay for it? Zhang Cheng randomly found a chair and sat down, opening the package that he had just received. Chapter 37. The bag that was covered in moss wasn't big. It was only as wide as an adult's palm, but it was very soft to the touch. It even smelled like a lush green forest. Ever since he became a mage, Zhang Cheng was especially sensitive to energy. He immediately sensed that the bag was surrounded by the faint power of nature. It was obvious that this wasn't an ordinary bag. It was a bag that had been blessed by nature magic. To be more precise, it was an evergreen bag. Many druids like to carry one with them to save rare and precious plants. Its function was to allow the seeds of plants to germinate quickly under any conditions. When the plants grew to a certain extent, they could be transplanted to other places. As for the black soil, it was naturally the soil of the famous Ongoro crater. Due to the large amounts of nutrient-rich volcanic ash that erupted from the fire plume ridge all year round, coupled with the magical radiation from the energy crystals, the soil in the area was extremely special. Even if a plant that was about to die was planted there, it could be revived in just 2 or 3 days. It was very, very magical. All of this knowledge was recorded in a book called Azeroth's Geography. When Zhang Cheng went to the library to return the notes, he took it out and read a bit of it. Just as he was about to ask where he got the evergreen bag, Old George, who had been standing there silently for a long time, suddenly said, Sir, after serious consideration, I believe that there are only 2 items that you would be interested in. Even if I gave you the rest, you wouldn't want it. Oh, what 2 items? Zhang Cheng raised his head with interest. The first item is gemstones. It includes peacock stones, tiger's eye stones, shadow stones, green agates, moonstones, emeralds, topaz, and rubies. There are a total of 140 of them, which are worth about 60 gold coins. If you're willing to accept them as collateral, I can give you a discount. Let's set it at 50 gold coins. As for the second item, it is more troublesome to deal with. It is a small smelted gold ingot, which is worth 100 gold coins. I originally planned to sell it to the goblin that often appears in South Shore, but for some reason, that darned green guy hasn't appeared for 2 months. Similarly, I'll give you a discount. Let's make it 70 gold coins. Old George calmly listed out the most valuable goods that he had on hand, as well as the goods that he had accumulated for a long time. Perhaps in the eyes of the people on Earth, whether it was gems or gold, they were all invaluable goods, and there was no need to worry about not being able to sell them. However, in Azeroth, whether it was gold or gems, although they were valuable, it was not easy to sell them. This was especially true for the Eastern continent, where the Alliance was located. Only a handful of skilled dwarven craftsmen and the elven jewelry masters in Silvermoon City had the ability to process gemstones that contained magical energy. Unfortunately, the dwarves themselves were experts at digging and mining. They rarely purchased gems from the outside world, and Silver Moon City had a tense relationship with the Alliance. Recently, they had even cut off all trade, resulting in a huge backlog of gems, causing their prices to plummet. Gold was even worse. Ever since the establishment of the human kingdoms, the upper class had always firmly controlled the right to mint coins. In theory, in the Alliance, only the gold coins minted by the Stormwind Kingdom, Dalaran, the fallen Lordaeran Kingdom, Kul Tira's Riptide Castle, and Ironforge Castle were legal and could be used for circulation. The rest of the gold coins were all illegally minted. If they were discovered, their entire family would be hanged. Therefore, after gold was mined, it was either sold to the mint at a low price or used as a manufacturing and decorative material. Those who were brave enough could even smuggle it out and sell it to the greedy goblins. Although the price was very low, it was still slightly higher than the mint's purchase price. After buying it back, the goblins would create their own currency and bring it to the Horde territory to buy all kinds of goods. Then, using the so-called neutral conditions, they would sell the goods to the Alliance and continuously make a profit. The orcs, taurens, and trolls who had no understanding of the complicated financial system did not know that their economic lifeline had been unknowingly controlled by these green-skinned goblins. As long as the other party used a little trick, their market would be shaken and they would fall into an unprecedented price crisis. However, for Zhang Cheng, these valuable and small pieces of gold and gemstones were the most ideal items to take with him when he left. After pretending to hesitate for a while, he reluctantly nodded. "All right, since you helped me get the herb seeds, the evergreen pouch, and the soil from Ungoro Crater, I'll agree. But there is one thing. You have to send the goods over. I have been quite busy recently and need to concentrate on a magic experiment. I don't have time to deal with trivial matters." "Of course. No problem. Thank you again for your generosity. I will give you the rest of the money within 2 months. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. I'll personally deliver the gold ingots and gems to your house tomorrow morning at the latest." Old George was overjoyed and bowed deeply. He could not believe that the things that had been in his hands for more than 2 months could be sold so easily. There was no careful probing, no bargaining, and no endless negotiations. A few words, a verbal promise, and the deal was done. Holy light! If only all the trading partners could be as straightforward as this. Since the deal is done, let's end our conversation here. After saying that, Zhang Cheng grabbed the things on the table and walked towards the basement. Before he could take a few steps, Old George immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "Sir Mage, wait, I have one more thing. Jenny will start her apprenticeship next week. I hope that she can move in tonight. Is that okay?" "Yes. Other than the basement and the first room on the right on the second floor, she can choose any room as her bedroom as long as she does not disturb my research." Zhang Cheng agreed without turning his head. "My dear baby, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring your luggage in." After getting a positive answer, Old George turned around and waved his arms at his beloved daughter with a big smile. His joy was beyond words. "Oh!" The girl, who did not understand the situation, looked at him with her big eyes and responded softly. She lifted her beautiful white dress and ran back to the door. A few seconds later, she dragged 2 heavy wooden boxes back to the living room. Chapter 38. In the dimly lit basement, Zhang Cheng was lying on the ground alone, carrying out the final inspection before the summoning ritual. After all, summoning an elemental of equal strength was not an easy task. Not only did he have to use powerful magic to drag it out, but he also had to defeat it and seal it in the soul diamond. There could not be any mistakes or accidents in the whole process. Otherwise, the enraged elemental would kill the summoner and destroy everything in sight. There was no doubt that Zhang Cheng did not like accidents, not at all. Hence, he checked very carefully. After repeatedly confirming that there were no mistakes, he quickly got up and placed a small piece of water essence, glowing with dark blue light, in the center of the imprisonment spell. He then raised the flint staff in his hand and chanted in a low voice, "Maroas, the great spirit of water, warrior under Duke Hidakis, please heed my call and appear before me." In an instant, in the center of the basement, A large amount of dark blue seawater with a slight fishy smell emerged out of thin air. The water seemed to have a life of its own as it quickly gathered and formed a relatively fixed shape. It had no legs, and its lower body was completely made up of rolling waves. The upper body had two thick arms, and even from a few meters away, one could still clearly hear the gurgling sound of the water flowing at high speed. Following that, it swallowed the water essence in one gulp. Obviously, this was the typical form of a water elemental, but in terms of size, it was larger than ordinary water elemental. "Mortal, what is your purpose in summoning me?" A majestic voice echoed in Zhang Cheng's mind. Without any hesitation, he crushed the arcane rune worth 3 gold coins in his sleeve. Before the water elemental, named Meroas, could react to what was going on, it immediately felt that its connection with the elemental world had been cut off, and it could no longer draw power from it. Feeling that it had been deceived, it did not even say a word of nonsense, and directly waved its fists to attack. Zhang Cheng, who was already prepared, raised his hand to cast Flame Impact, and turned around to use Blink to distance himself. Asterisk pa. Asterisk along with the sound of the impact. A part of Meroa's huge body evaporated on the spot, and its movements slowed down. "Good. Very good. That's it. Keep the rhythm," Zhang Cheng muttered to himself as he guided the arcane missiles. He knew very well that against water elementals, ice-type spells were completely useless. Only arcane spells and fire spells could truly cause damage. But Meroa's was not to be trifled with. Seeing the arcane missiles flying in the sky, it ignored them and quickly condensed a bone-chilling ice in front of its two arms. Damn it, it could also use frost spells. The book mentioned this before. Zhang Cheng clenched his teeth and cursed. He quickly raised his right hand and released his trump card against spellcasters, Counterspell. Under the influence of the chaotic mana vortex, Meroa's frost arrow was immediately interrupted, and he wouldn't be able to cast another spell for some time. He was thoroughly enraged, and in a way that outsiders could not understand, he made the water flow revolve around his body at high speed and erupt, forming a terrifying high-pressure water knife. In the blink of an eye, the water plowed a gully a few centimeters deep in the ground. If it came into contact with a human body, it was obvious that it would be torn to pieces, and there wouldn't even be a complete corpse left. Seeing this scene, Zhang Cheng felt his scalp go numb. He immediately gave up on the plan of using arcane missiles to slowly grind his opponent to death, and began to prepare the most powerful and destructive fireball spell. With the help of the distance created by Blink, he had enough time to complete the preparation of 1 or 2 fireballs. So in just 2 or 3 seconds, a dazzling flame burst out from his palm. As a water elemental, Meroa's was undoubtedly very sensitive to fire. It immediately felt the threat and urged the water flow to roll forward. But before it could move halfway, a scorching fireball flew over and smashed into its face. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the intense explosion and high temperature completely destroyed the head and torso on the spot. Perhaps for an ordinary body of flesh and blood, such an injury would be enough to cause immediate death. But for an elemental, it was no different from an ordinary injury. In the blink of an eye, the evaporated parts grew back, but the body size was reduced by a little. There was no fear, no pain, no fatal parts. This was the reason why both the Alliance and the Horde would have a headache when it came to elementals. Imagine a warrior full of confidence, swinging a sharp blade to chop off the head of an earth elemental, only to find that the other party didn't fall down and even used a fist as big as a sandbag to shatter his ribs. How wonderful would the expression on his face be? Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng was now facing such a situation. He had to exhaust the energy that supported the water elemental in front of him before his mana ran out, and reveal the part called the elemental core. Of course, this wasn't easy, especially since the water elemental didn't have a relatively fixed form. Unless a large amount of water was evaporated, it was impossible to determine the location of the elemental core with just the naked eye. The only thing to be thankful for was that long before the summoning, He had already set up several traps in the basement that stored arcane energy. Moreau's had only taken a few steps when he stepped on one of them. The dazzling arcane energy formed a cage of light pillars in just half a second. Although it had only used 5 or 6 seconds to break free from the shackles with its terrifying water daggers, Zhang Cheng had used this time to release 2 large fireballs in a row, forcibly reducing its originally tall appearance to a height of only 2 meters. And at the center of the torso, a piece of dark blue substance like a sapphire flashed and disappeared. Although the time was very short, Zhang Cheng was still sharp enough to catch it and brave the danger of being split in half by the water dagger. He rushed forward in a flash, waved his arm, and fiercely released flame impact. Asterisk bang. Asterisk accompanied by a muffled sound. The dark blue substance flew out directly and fell to the ground with a clang. At the same time, the body of the water elemental seemed to have lost its vitality and suddenly turned into splashing water. Phew! I did it! I did it! Zhang Cheng didn't care at all about his wet robe, and excitedly rushed over to pick up the elemental core, called the Ball of Pure Water, and then placed it next to a crystal-clear soul diamond, and loudly chanted the spell needed for the imprisonment ritual. Chapter 39. Feeling the cold touch of the gemstone, Zhang Cheng realized that Moreau's soul had been imprisoned inside, and from time to time, it would erupt with fierce resistance, trying to break through the barrier and return to the elemental world. However, it was a pity that it was only a soul, and it was powerless against the dense protective runes that covered the surface of the gemstone. After trying several times, it stopped struggling and roared through the spiritual connection with its 2 eyes that were filled with anger. Mortal, you don't know what you have done. If Duke Hydrax knew that you had used despicable means to imprison a warrior under his command, he would order all the water elementals of Hydrax to hunt you down until the end of time. I agree with you, but the problem is, do you think I will let him know? Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged. There was no doubt that he was in a good mood after successfully imprisoning the water elementals on his first try. As for whether it would lead to enmity with the water elementals of Hydrax, he did not care. What is your goal? Seeing that his threats did not have any effect, Moreau's put away his violent temper and asked coldly. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and replied with a slightly contemptuous tone. Goal? My goal is simple, and that is to become your master, and you will become my most loyal. Before he could finish, Moreau's immediately roared crazily. You are dreaming. I, the great water elemental warrior. I will never bow down to a mortal. Haha, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that is not up to you. After smiling meaningfully, Zhang Cheng placed the soul gemstone in a silver box engraved with mysterious runes and gently closed the lid. He then found a place to sit down and picked up the guide to herb cultivation to read with relish. After about half an hour, he threw the book aside, opened the lid, and took out the soul gemstone. He asked in a motionless tone, Moreau's, tell me, have you changed your mind? Yes, great master. I am your most loyal and dependable servant. The water elemental's hollow and emotionless voice echoed in his mind. There was no anger, no resistance, and no uncontrollable roar. There was only respect and obedience. Those who did not know the reason would find it hard to imagine why Moreau's, who had maintained an arrogant attitude not long ago, would suddenly become like this. The answer was simple. The small silver box was actually a magical item. Through illusions and mental stimulation, he could forcefully weave memories and finally achieve the goal of making the soul of elements obey his will. As the magic city, Dalaran had already mastered a series of methods to control the elements. Not to mention a mere water elemental warrior, even Duke Hydaki's wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being enslaved. Seeing that the brainwashing was successful, Zhang Cheng immediately used his remaining magic power to summon the soul of elements imprisoned in the gemstone. Following the sound of splashing water, Mel Royas appeared in front of him once again. However, this time, the huge water elemental did not make any moves to attack. Instead, it quietly stayed where it was, as if waiting for orders to be given. Is this what it feels like to gain power and control fate? No wonder so many mages lose themselves in the process of pursuing great power. This feeling of addiction is really indescribable. Zhang narrowed his eyes and could not help but sigh. Summoning and controlling the elements did not only mean an increase in combat power, but also an increase in the power of a mage. Just as he completed the summoning, he gained another 2 talent points and learned Create Mana Agate at the same time. This also meant that, according to the standards of the game, he had risen from level 26 to level 28 as a mage. Whether it was the upper limit of his magic power or the power of his spells, they had all been enhanced. After immersing himself in this wonderful feeling for a few minutes, Zhang immediately forced himself to wake up. While recovering his magic power with the help of the magic nodes in Dalaran, he took out the boiling flame essence and prepared to imprison the next soul of elements. After all, with the help of Meroa's and the convenience of his own frost talent, he believed that defeating a fire elemental of similar strength would not be a difficult task. But before the summoning ritual began, he heard a knock on the door upstairs. Then, little Jenny's voice came through the gap in the door. Mr. Mage, someone is looking for you." "Looking for me? Who is it?" Zhang was slightly stunned and hurriedly asked loudly. "One is Garrick, whom you know, and the other is his friend, Frank." The girl answered truthfully. Garrick and Frank? Zhang suddenly had a bad feeling. He quickly put away the flame essence and canceled the summoning of the water elemental. He grabbed the soul diamond and stuffed it into his pocket before opening the door and walking out of the basement. As soon as he crossed the threshold into the living room, he saw 2 young men walking back and forth anxiously, especially Frank. His whole body was covered in dust, and his eyes couldn't hide the tiredness and anxiety. His arm was wrapped in bandages, and he seemed to be injured. "What's the matter? What happened?" Zhang subconsciously frowned. Holy light above. "Mr. Mage, I finally see you. I beg you, quickly think of a way to save us." Not long after you left, those damned undead surrounded the town from all directions and continuously threw plagues into the town. In just a few days, our cats, dogs, pigs, horses, chickens, and ducks all turned into man-eating monsters. In recent days, some people have shown similar symptoms. I'm afraid that the Stratholme tragedy is repeating itself in our town. Frank was obviously very agitated as he described incoherently. "Throwing plagues? Have you told the archmages about this?" Zhang face instantly became gloomy. Of course, he was not worried about the life and death of the farmers in the town, but whether his mission reward would shrink because of this. Garrick smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Sir, we are just militia without any status. How could we have the opportunity to see the Archmage? The reason why we came to see you first is to ask you to bring the news to the Kirin Tor Council." "Damn it, what are you waiting for? Follow me. I'll take you directly to see Archmage Anselm Ruinvawal." Understanding the urgency of the situation, Zhang did not even change out of his wet robe. He rushed out of the house with the flint staff and walked towards the central tower. Chapter 40. Passing through the streets that were still under construction and expansion, Zhang quickly brought the 2 youths to the entrance of the tower. He made a straightforward request to the tall, arcane puppets guarding both sides. "I want to see His Excellency, the Great Wizard." Immediately, a light flashed quickly on the head of the puppet. It seemed to be communicating with someone. After about a minute, it responded with a metallic voice. "The Master agrees to see you, but only for yourself, not for the 2 followers behind you." "Okay, I got it." Zhang nodded gently, turned to Garrick and Frank, and said, "Don't go anywhere. Just wait for me here." "Understood. In fact, we have nowhere else to go now." According to the messenger's report, South Shore seems to be harassed by a terrible necromancer, and they have no energy to care about anything else. So, Dalaran is the only hope for the town. After that, Frank's face was full of despair. He really couldn't think of what he could do next if he failed to ask for help. Maybe rushing back to fight with his family and friends until he was killed or infected with the plague and turn into a monster was a good choice. Feeling the torment in the hearts of the two young men, Zhang Cheng patted them on the shoulder comfortingly. Without saying anything, he turned and crossed the threshold and disappeared into the corridor. Unlike the last time when he jumped directly from the top of the tower, this time he climbed more than 200 steps along the stairs in one breath before he entered the alchemy laboratory on the top floor. Before he could say anything, Anselm Ruinviver, who was standing in front of the workbench, greeted him without looking back. "Ah, you finally appeared. Come here, I have something interesting to show you." "Something interesting?" Zhang Cheng blinked doubtfully. "Yes, something interesting. Do you still remember the plague samples you brought back? I used my spare time to do a little test. Guess what I found?" The Archmage said as he lifted the wooden cage placed on the table. There was a big, black, and ferocious-looking rat locked up inside. Unlike most rats, it did not seem to be afraid, nor did it show any signs of aggression. It just stayed quietly in the cage. Zhang Cheng walked closer and bent down to observe carefully for a while. He asked with some uncertainty, "This mouse seems to be a bit strange. Have you done anything to it?" "Huh, that was right. I extracted a special ingredient from those magical plagues that significantly increased the intelligence of animals and strengthened their muscles. Of course, the side effects are not small. Calculating the time, it should be about time." Anselm Ruinwilver raised his head and glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. Just as he finished speaking, the mouse's body suddenly began to expand rapidly. In less than half a minute, it broke through the cage and changed from the size of an adult cat to the size of a fierce dog. What was even more frightening was that the fur on the surface of its body had all fallen off due to some unknown reason, revealing a bloody layer of skin. It was exactly the same as the terrifying plague dogs in the land of plague, and it was also letting out a low growl. "Damn it!" Zhang Cheng cursed in a low voice and hurriedly took a few steps back. He didn't want to try the consequences of being bitten. However, his worries were obviously unnecessary. Just as the rat was about to launch an attack, countless energy clusters drew beautiful arcs in the air and hit the target. Instantly, the rat was blasted into pieces of flesh and blood. Even the hard marble floor that had been reinforced by magic was blasted into small pits. As one of the few archmages in Dalaran, how could Anselm Ruinwilver let a mutant mouse run wild in his territory? Looking at the pool of dark red sticky substance on the ground, Zhang Cheng's mouth twitched involuntarily. This was because even though they were both using the most basic arcane missiles, the power released by the other party was at least 100 times stronger than his. It was no wonder that he had dared to return with more than 3,000 people and rebuild Dalaran under the nose of the Dark Queen Sylvanas. Undercity and Dalaran were only separated by Lordimir Lake. The Forsaken could reach there in only 30 hours by water, and the reinforcements of the Alliance had to cross the ocean and land its south shore, at least first. After a few days and nights of rapid march, they could arrive. There is no doubt that this was the confidence brought by strength. "How is it? Do you see anything?" Anselm Ruinwilver raised his head and asked with a smile. After hesitating for a few seconds, Zhang Cheng frowned and replied, "The substance you just mentioned seems to have overdrawn the potential of this mouse, and I think it also gives it some characteristics of other animals." Praiseworthy, keen observation. The Archmage nodded approvingly, then picked up a small bottle of plague sample and sighed in a deep voice, "I have to admit that the Royal Pharmacist Association of the Forsaken is indeed an amazing organization. They actually invented a technology that can fuse the characteristics of many animals. No matter if it is a human or an animal, as long as it is infected, it will immediately begin to undergo a huge change in the body and even mutate from one organism to another. But the problem is that this change is not stable. In about a few days to a few weeks, the infected body will collapse because it can't withstand the change. So, in essence, this new plague is not so much a plague, but a failed strengthening agent. But if combined with the plague used by the original scourge, it will be a terrifying weapon that can even kill the undead. What's even more chilling is that this plague is far from reaching its limit. I alone know more than a dozen research directions that can increase the power of the plague. Then how do you plan to deal with this matter?" Zhang Cheng frowned and probed. Hearing this description, he increasingly felt that the new plague was not so much a plague, but a magical version of a genetic weapon. Perhaps the Dreadlord intended to use the power of the Forsaken to severely damage all life in Azeroth, including the undead Scourge, in preparation for the army's invasion again. Ansram Ruinwilver stroked his beard and thought for a few minutes. Finally, he smiled and said, "I'm very interested in this new plague. If possible, I hope to get its formula." Coincidentally, I just received news that the Forsaken are releasing a large number of plagues to a farm town not far from Dalaran. Don't you think the Council should take some action? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a strange light as he slightly bowed and suggested, "Oh, really? They dare to do such a thing?" The Archmage's face darkened, and his tone became serious. Chapter 41. A few hours later, as the sun slowly set from the horizon, a team consisting of 6 Kirin Tor Parliament mages, 50 Dalaran patrol guards, 2 scouts in charge of reconnaissance, and 4 arcane puppets left Dalaran's magic shield and headed east quickly. The leader of this team was none other than Zhang Cheng. After repeated questioning and consideration, Anslam Ruiniverver determined that the pharmacist who created the plague was probably hiding around the town, observing and recording the various parameters of the plague for in-depth research. His mission was to bring people to attack the camp of the Forgotten from behind, capture or kill the pharmacist alive, and then find the formula from various notes and information and rescue the besieged farmers. Even though there were only 50 of them, their combat prowess was far greater than that of a regular army of 500. This was especially true for the combination of the arcane puppets and the mages. They could easily annihilate hundreds and thousands of enemies in their charge, while the well-equipped Dalaran guards could ensure that no enemy managed to break through the blockade and harm the mages who were protected by layers of protection. Just as Zhang Cheng was silently considering whether he should send his men to the town to inquire about the situation or launch an attack directly, a female mage around the age of 40 came over and asked in a low voice, "Respected leader, I have a question that I would like to ask you." What's the question?" Zhang Cheng raised his head and glanced at the other party. "Why do we have to use such a primitive and backward method of walking? Isn't it faster and more convenient to use group teleportation?" The female mage frowned and questioned. "Group teleportation? Don't you know that there are many mages among the Forgotten? Any form of tearing space will attract their attention. If we use teleportation to reach the destination, then I guarantee that the moment the teleportation is completed, what awaits us will be a classic ambush," Zhang Cheng explained impatiently. If he could use teleportation, would he still be willing to endure the pain of riding a horse? Anyone who had ridden a horse knew how painful it was to have the skin on the inner thigh scraped. What about the mission? So far, we still don't know the purpose of this trip. The female mage was obviously a little unwilling and continued to ask. As a low-level mage who had worked for the Kirin Tor Parliament for nearly 10 years, she seemed to be unable to accept a young man climbing over her head and giving orders. Zhang Cheng, who was used to such situations, smiled and replied in a meaningful tone, "Pay attention to your status, Aaliyah. There are some things you need to know, and I will tell you. But you'd better not ask about things you shouldn't know. Remember, I am the leader and commander personally appointed by His Excellency, the Great Wizard. You only need to obey orders, understand?" After saying that, he deliberately fiddled with the violet ring on his finger, which had 3 extra golden lines. Although the equipment effect was no different from the ordinary violet ring, the 3 golden lines symbolized a higher status and identity. The female mage called Aaliyah's pupil shrank, and her expression became unsightly. She wanted to retort several times, but in the end, she gave up and dejectedly returned to the group of mages. After all, where there were people, there would be competition, especially in an organization like the Kirin Tor Council, which was full of mages. Every step of advancement meant that they would gain more knowledge and resources, and more knowledge and resources were equivalent to gaining more power. No mage could resist such a temptation. Zhang Cheng was very clear that he, who appeared out of thin air, had no foundation in Dalaran. Now that he suddenly gained the trust and cultivation of Ansram Ruinwilver, it would naturally cause some people to be dissatisfied or jealous. But he didn't care very much, and he was not prepared to explain anything. Because after more than a week of learning and research, he understood that mages had to speak with their strength, not with their social skills. In the Kirin Tor Council, when a mage's level reached a certain level, he would naturally get the corresponding identity and status. On the contrary, no matter how good a mage was at socializing, if his strength was not enough, he would never be promoted. After a short round of confrontation, Zhang Cheng forcibly suppressed the few members in the group who were dissatisfied with him. At least on the surface, the other party did not dare to continue to test him and silently followed the group. With a slightly depressing atmosphere, the group finally entered the periphery of the farm before dawn. Although the light was very dim at the moment, they could still see that the original golden wheat field had been infected by the terrible shadow energy, showing an unhealthy dark gray color. Strange yellow spots covered every inch of the land, and the originally docile small animals had mutated, showing a strong aggressiveness. Just when everyone was shocked by this terrible scene, a scout in charge of intelligence passed through the wheat field and ran back breathlessly to report. "Your Excellency, I have investigated the location of the Forgotten Ones camp. They are stationed in the woods southeast of the town, with a total number of about 300 people. 50 of them are members of the Earthy Basin Combat Force. The polluters and the rest are ordinary undead. As for the pharmacist you are looking for, I'm sorry, I haven't found him yet." "Polluters? Be more specific." Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and asked. 30 soldiers of the Legion, 2 mages, 2 shadow priests, 1 stitched abomination, 5 thieves, 10 dark rangers. Please forgive my bluntness, but the opponent's strength is not to be underestimated." After saying that, a hint of nervousness appeared in the scout's eyes. Zhang Cheng nodded noncommittally and turned to ask the guard captain behind him, "What do you think? If it was a head-on battle, I would suggest that you defend or retreat. But this is a sneak attack. We are in the dark, and the enemy is in the open. So I suggest that you give them the heaviest blow before they discover us. First, we need to occupy a hidden vantage point, gather the mage's strength, and summon a blizzard or a rain of fire to attack the camp. Then, with the help of the arcane puppets, we will attack and kill their priests and mages in the chaos. Your Excellency, I think victory belongs to us," the man in his 50s confidently suggested. "All right, we'll do as you say. Garrick, you're most familiar with the terrain. Do you know of any vantage points around? I plan to give the enemy a small surprise." Zhang Cheng looked at the youth who was breathing rapidly. The latter clenched his fist tightly and nodded with a sinister smile. "Of course. Mr. Mage, I happen to know of a hillside that fits your requirements. Please don't hold back. You must teach these damned bastards a lesson and let them know that the Alliance is not to be trifled with." Chapter 42. Using the last half an hour of darkness before dawn as cover, the team quickly passed through the Forsaken's perimeter and stopped at a hillside less than 600 meters away from them. Due to the close distance, they could clearly see what was going on in the camp from above. The gigantic sutured abomination was as conspicuous as a torch in the middle of the night. As one of the most powerful units in the undead army, its entire body was sewn together from all sorts of corpses. The only difference was that some abominations were infused with souls, while others were soulless. They were completely powered by psychic magic. The former had independent consciousness and the ability to think, and could make subjective judgments based on orders. Some of the more intelligent, sutured abominations could even become commanders of the army. However, the latter were closer to living puppets. Once their controller was killed, they would just stand there stupidly or carry out the last order given. They were meat shields, high-level cannon fodder, and the like. According to Zhang Cheng's understanding, most of the sutured abominations of the Forsaken were made by the Royal Potions Guild. Thus, the appearance of an abomination in the camp meant that there was a potion master nearby. As for whether this abomination had intelligence or was just a puppet, it was impossible to tell based on its appearance. He planned to let the arcane puppets deal with this huge problem when they launched the attack. Otherwise, with the terrifying strength of the sutured abomination, it would immediately be a tragic massacre if it charged into the midst of the guards. As a person who knew his own limits, Zhangqing never felt that he could command an army with no practical experience. Thus, he generously delegated authority to Air. This old man who had experienced 2 wars with the orcs did not waste any time. He first ordered the guards to enter the assault position, then immediately asked the mages to begin the summoning ritual. In a short 10 minutes, a dark cloud shrouded the entire enemy camp. If it were daytime, the Forsaken would immediately notice the abnormality above their heads. Unfortunately, it was now the last bit of darkness before sunrise. There was not even a speck of starlight, so even if someone raised their head occasionally, it would not be easy to distinguish. As the first ray of light appeared on the horizon, the captain of the guards, Air, walked with heavy steps to Zhangqing. He spoke in a relaxed tone. "Sir, everything is ready. Please give the order to attack. If everything goes well, we can still make it in time for a hot breakfast." "Oh, you're still thinking about breakfast?" Zhangqing raised his eyebrows in surprise. He really couldn't understand how the other party could still be so calm when the battle was about to start. It was as if he was going to complete a simple task instead of risking his life to kill the enemy. "Ha ha ha, why not? I participated in countless battles. Can you guess what truth I've comprehended from those battles?" Air asked with a laugh. "What is it?" "It's simple. On the battlefield, the more nervous and afraid one was, the faster one would die. On the contrary, the more relaxed and fearless a person was, the more likely they were to survive the fierce battles. I was a warrior, and warriors always believed in their instincts. Right now, my instincts were telling me that the upcoming battle would be an easy one. Therefore, instead of worrying about the outcome, I might as well think about the problem of breakfast. After all, I've been walking all night, and my stomach is already rumbling from hunger." Then, Ire patted his stomach, implying that the danger of the Forgotten One was not as important as his hunger. Obviously, his attitude, which bordered on contempt, greatly boosted the morale of the guards. At least, the guards who were still a little nervous could not help but grin. Zhangqing was not a fool. He immediately realized that the old man in front of him seemed to be using some kind of psychological tactic. He quickly smiled and cooperated. "If that's the case, then hurry up and attack. I happen to know that the pork pies in the town taste pretty good. If you can complete the task before the sun rises completely, I'll treat everyone to a full meal. Of course, there will be delicious wine too. Did you all hear that? Destroy the enemy camp before the sun rises completely. Don't let the delicious pies and wine fly away." Air shouted as he drew his long sword, mounted his warhorse, and joined the ranks of the assault. Seeing that the time was right, Zhangqing directly ordered the mages behind him. "Release. Let these living dead know what the consequences of angering the Kirin Tor Council are." "As you wish." A male mage in his 30s bent down and bowed. He then raised both his hands and used his consciousness to guide the arcane energy into the dark clouds in the sky. In less than 3 to 5 seconds, hailstones the size of basketballs fell from the sky like raindrops, launching a blanket attack on the camp of the Forgotten One. Bang, 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 accompanied by the crackling sounds. The undead who had not yet figured out what was going on were knocked to the ground by the heavy lumps of ice. Some of them had their limbs broken, while others had their skulls shattered and died on the spot. For a moment, every Forgotten One was desperately looking for cover, trying to avoid the concentrated hailstone attack. In the midst of this chaos, a few people with magic staffs suddenly walked out of the tent in the center of the camp, shouting loudly in a language that the living could not understand. In the blink of an eye, 20 to 30 Forgotten One soldiers gathered, raising their shields to defend against the hailstones falling from the sky. "The enemy's mages and priests have appeared. Go, kill them for me." Air roared as he whipped his mount, leading the guards to charge out. Along with them were 2 large arcane puppets. Dozens of galloping warhorses and heavy arcane puppets immediately caused the ground to shake violently. At the same time, the undead realized that they had been ambushed by the enemy. They quickly picked up their weapons and prepared to fight to the death. Unfortunately, with their formation scattered, how could they withstand the terrifying impact of the arcane puppets? 4 or 5 soldiers who tried to block the entrance of the camp with their shields were sent flying more than 10 meters away by the arcane puppets' sandbag-sized fists. In the end, they lay motionless on the ground. There was no need to ask to know that they were definitely dead. With the arcane puppets' steel-like bodies, it was difficult for ordinary weapons to truly damage their energy core, which was under heavy protection. They forcibly cleared away all the obstacles along the way, opening up a path for the guards following closely behind. Seeing that the enemy was getting closer and closer to them, the leader of the Forgotten One immediately waved his arms and shouted, as if he was talking to someone. Chapter 43. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the arcane puppet let out a deafening sound as it crashed to the ground, kicking up a large cloud of sand and dust. However, this level of impact was nothing to it. It quickly got up with its arms and pounced at the sutured abomination a few meters away. The latter showed no signs of weakness as it raised its blood-stained axe and scythe to meet the attack. 1 second later, asterisk bang. Asterisk 2 gigantic creatures over 4 meters tall crashed into each other and started a fight to the death. Deafening sounds of collisions rang out incessantly. Air was overjoyed to see the only threat being held back by the arcane puppet. Just as he was about to order the other arcane puppet to charge at the central tent, a nearby tent suddenly collapsed, and a large, sutured abomination emerged from within. Unlike the previous one, this one seemed to have just been completed. Its corpse was still very fresh, with no signs of decay, and its weapon was not stained with any blood. Zhang Qing's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene from a faraway hillside. He immediately questioned the youth in charge of scouting. "What's going on? Didn't you say there was only one sutured abomination?" "I'm very sorry, Sir Leader. I didn't find 2 sutured abominations when I was scouting, but I saw a tent full of corpses. Perhaps they were created just now." The youth hurriedly knelt on one knee and quickly explained. "Forget it. One more abomination won't change the outcome of their defeat. Get ready, we'll join the battle as well." Zhang Cheng quickly covered himself with a magic shield, mounted his horse, and controlled the remaining 2 arcane puppets to attack from sides. He didn't want to lose the advantage he had painstakingly built up and allow the members of the Royal Apothecary Association to retreat safely. He also didn't want his mission reward to go down the drain. Although the 3 mages led by Ally were a little reluctant to get close to the dangerous battlefield, they still obediently obeyed the order in the end. After all, once a secret operation like this was completed, every one of them would receive a generous reward, and it would also add to their resume. 600 meters was covered in the blink of an eye on horseback. When the 6 mages blasted open the fences on the side of the camp with fireballs and began slaughtering the injured or crippled undead, the scales of victory completely tilted towards the living. "Damn it, go hold them back. I will inform the potioneers to retreat. The information of the new plague must not fall into the hands of outsiders." The commander of the Forgotten Ones roared in the language of the undead. He could not believe that Dalaran, who only had a few thousand people, dared to send an army right under the nose of Gloom City. However, roaring was one thing. With the 2 stitched abominations suppressed by the arcane golems and the mage and priest repeatedly trampled over, anyone with a little common sense could see that the Forgotten Ones were doomed. No matter how they struggled, it was useless. What's more, the Dalaran guards led by Ire constantly controlled their war horses to charge forward, eliminating all threats in the bud. The enemy could not organize any effective resistance at all. The one-sided massacre lasted for about 20 minutes. When the last Forsaken fell, the battle finally came to an end. There were no screams, no begging for mercy, and no surrendering captives. There were only mutilated corpses and the pungent smell of embalming fluid. Zhang Cheng now understood why the Forgotten Ones could stand firm in the north of the eastern continent despite their small numbers. Perhaps it was just as they said. They had nothing left to lose, so there was nothing to fear. Their only purpose in life was to exact their ultimate revenge on the Lich King. For this, they would not hesitate to pay any price. Sir, we have lost 12 people, and 7 are heavily injured. Do you think you could distribute some healing potions? The old man asked with a serious expression as he walked over, wiping away the mucus and flesh on his beard. Of course. But before that, tell me, have you found what I want? Zhang Cheng turned and looked into the man's eyes. Iyer smiled bitterly and shook his head. No, my men have searched the entire camp, but they did not find the potioneers you mentioned, nor any information related to the plague. They seem to have escaped during the chaos. Do you want me to send someone to chase after them? No, no need. Take your men to the town and rest. I'll take care of the rest myself. Zhang Cheng seemed to have noticed something. He turned his gaze to a tree a dozen meters away. You're going alone? Isn't it too dangerous? Why don't you bring an arcane puppet? As a warrior, Iyer's senses were sharp. He instantly sensed someone hiding in the tree and subconsciously tightened his grip on his sword. If the other party moved, he would immediately draw his sword and block in front of him. Relax, don't be nervous. Go about your business. I can handle it. All right, if there's any danger, please fire a signal flare. We'll rush over as quickly as possible. Seeing that Zhang Cheng had made up his mind, Iyer shrugged helplessly. He quickly ordered his men to gather the sown abomination and the corpses of the forgotten ones and burn them all. He then led the injured back to the town. When everyone was far away, Zhang Cheng shouted at the top of the tree with a faint smile, "Beautiful lady, are you not planning to come down?" Just as he finished speaking, a black figure suddenly descended from the sky. She used the branches to slow down her fall before finally landing firmly on the ground. Short black hair, emerald green eyes, and a curvaceous figure that would fill countless men's fantasies, she was none other than Sophia, who had snuck into the room and delivered a small gift not too long ago. This female syndicate assassin took 2 steps forward with light steps. She lifted her non-existent skirt and gave an elegant, ladylike bow. She then curled her lips and greeted with a smile. "Good morning, young and handsome mage. We meet again." Yes, there's nothing happier than a reunion between friends. If you don't mind, can you do me a little favor and tell me which direction the potion master of the Forgotten Ones escaped in? As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised his staff, causing the gem at the top to emit a dazzling red light. Anyone with a little common sense would know that this was a sign before a mage cast a spell. Are you threatening me? Sophia's expression changed slightly, revealing a wary expression. Chapter 44. Sophia carefully looked into Zhang Cheng's eyes, as if trying to determine if he was just trying to intimidate her, or if he would actually take action. After a full minute, she suddenly burst out laughing. While laughing, she teased, "Wow, bullying a weak woman is not befitting of your status as a noble mage. Firstly, you are not a weak and ordinary woman, but a dangerous syndicate assassin. Secondly, it is true that I am a mage, but I have never thought of myself as noble. As long as I can achieve my goals, I don't mind using some extreme methods. Now, make your choice. Do you want to be my friend or my enemy?" With that, Zhang Cheng leaned forward slightly, one hand gripping the reins tightly, as if he could suddenly attack at any time. Even though he did not intend to use violence, he did not mind teaching her a lesson if she did not know what was good for her. After all, the mission reward of the new plague was too tempting. It was so tempting that he would feed his morals and conscience to the dogs, and even do some crazy things. Do you still need to ask? I have always been your friend. If you are willing, our relationship can be further improved. For example, we could be lovers or even close allies. The female assassin licked her lips. Her reply was full of hints. Zhang Cheng smiled nonchalantly and kept his staff. He asked with a slightly playful tone, "Since we are friends, please explain why you are here. Could it be that the syndicate has fallen so low that they have started working with the undead? Working together? Are you kidding me? The Forgotten Ones have uprooted 2 watchtowers under my control within a few days. As the manager of Durnhold Castle, I must find out what they are up to, or I will not be able to sleep well." At the mention of the Forgotten Ones, Sophia immediately became furious. Her tone was filled with undisguised disgust and hatred. After all, she had just taken over and did not even have the time to properly grasp her authority. Now that such a huge mess had happened, it would be strange if she was in a good mood. "Oh, the watchtowers you have occupied have been uprooted?" Zhang Cheng suddenly understood something, and a gloating expression appeared on his face. Clearly, the Forsaken had eliminated all potential threats along the way in order to keep the new plague a secret. The syndicate was simply unlucky enough to be implicated. Sophia rolled her eyes in annoyance. Yes, not only did they uproot the sentry tower, but they also killed everyone inside the sentry tower. I followed them for 3 days and found out that their target was a small farm town with no value. I don't understand. With their strength, they clearly have the ability to destroy the simple fortifications in a few hours, but they chose to use the slowest method. No, we don't understand. The undead aren't just here to destroy this town. Their main purpose is to test the power of a new type of magical plague. Do you see those mutated animals and the contaminated wheat fields and land? They had already developed something even more terrifying than the scourge. I believe that you and I should work together on this matter to face the common threat. After all, no matter what, we are still living people. In order to gain his trust, Zhang Cheng revealed some information about the plague. After all, it wouldn't take long for all the intelligent races in Azeroth to know about the Forgotten One's research on the plague. He had only brought the time forward slightly. A new magical plague? Damn it, are these guys crazy? The female assassin couldn't help but tremble when she thought of the terrifying scene when the scourge broke out. She would never forget the time when she hid under the bed in a small house in the countryside and watched her biological father being torn to pieces by ghouls. She also couldn't forget how the thriving farm became a slaughterhouse for skeletons, ghosts, and crypt demons. Zhang Cheng pretended to helplessly spread out his hands and explained, "I don't know if they're crazy or not, but I know that the Archmage of Dalaran has already begun to pay attention to this matter. I led the team here to obtain information about the plague. From what I know, there's an organization called the Royal Potioneer Association among the Forgotten Ones. They specialize in developing all kinds of terrifying poisons and plagues. One of their members is in the camp and escaped with the information during the chaotic battle. Bring me to him, and I promise to give you a satisfactory reward." "A satisfactory reward?" Sophia slightly raised her sharp chin, her eyes full of desire. "Yes, as long as you don't cross my bottom line." Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. His strong desire for a small bottle of Sunwell water made him willing to pay a price, even if the price was his own. No matter what, when it came to matters of the sexes, as a man, he definitely wouldn't be the one at a disadvantage. Sophia, who was under the control of the charm spell, immediately seemed to be stimulated. Her face flushed red, and she couldn't help but moan softly. "Ah, awesome. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get me on the horse." "As you wish, charming lady." Zhang Cheng bent down and extended his left hand. The female assassin didn't say anything and jumped onto the horse. She grabbed the reins and smiled. "Hold on tight. Don't fall off the horse." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly tightened her legs and urged the horse to gallop towards the east. Because it was too sudden, Zhang Cheng almost fell off the horse. He hurriedly hugged her slender waist. Just like that, the two of them stuck close to each other, feeling each other's warmth and smell. Coupled with the friction from the bumpy ride of the horse, it was inevitable that some physiological reaction would occur. Slowly, the atmosphere became ambiguous. Galloping along the small country road, they soon left the polluted land. Zhang Cheng, who had never had a good sense of direction, enjoyed the stimulation from the friction as he asked loudly, "Where are you bringing me?" "Of course, we're going to the Sentry Tower at the intersection of Tarlan Mill and South Shore Town. I dare to bet that the necromancer will definitely escape to Tarlan Mill. So what we need to do is to take a detour and intercept him," Sophia explained without turning her head, although her tone was very calm. If one looked closely, they would notice that her breathing was much more rapid than usual. "All right, I'll listen to you. Zhang Cheng understood that it would be difficult to find a person in a hilly area filled with trees and grass. Rather than blindly searching, it would be better to block the path the other party would take. After more than 3 hours of galloping, the two of them finally arrived in front of a dilapidated brick sentry tower before their horses got tired. A masked man who was burying a corpse immediately put down the shovel in his hand and quickly ran over. He bowed respectfully. "Madam, you're finally back. How was it? Did you catch up to those damned undead?" "Yes, we caught up. Don't ask too many questions. Immediately light the fire beacon and mobilize all the people in the sentry tower to find a lone necromancer. Remember, once you find a target, immediately send a signal. Don't kill him. I want him alive." Sophia jumped down from her horse and quickly gave the order. "Understood. I'll light the fire beacon immediately." The masked man nodded vigorously and quickly ran to the top of the tower. Chapter 45. Looking at the sturdy tower in front of him, Zhang Cheng quickly deduced that this was probably a beacon tower built during the war with the orcs. It was used to transmit emergency military information. Ironically, after the collapse of the Lordaeron Kingdom, the beacon towers in the Hillsbrad Hills were occupied by the Syndicate bandits and the Forsaken. They were used to monitor the movements of South Shore, and when necessary, they would use the beacon towers as a springboard to launch attacks. Of course, none of this had anything to do with him. It did not matter if all the residents of South Shore died, as long as he could complete the mission and receive the rewards. Zhang Cheng jumped down from his horse and followed Sophia into the interior of the tower. Perhaps due to the massacre that had just taken place, large dark brown spots could be seen all over the floor and walls of the hall. Needless to say, those were the traces left behind after the blood had dried up. There was even a faint smell of blood in the air. There were no complicated decorations. There were a few thick bare skins on the ground, and there were 3 tables made of unknown wood. There were half-eaten roasted meat, bread, and fruits on the table. There were a few hammocks hanging in the corner, and there was a large pot on the fireplace. There was a fragrant soup simmering in the pot. Overall, this was a shelter that provided food and allowed people to rest peacefully. There was a spiral staircase that led to the top of the tower. 2 guards with bows and arrows were vigilantly observing the surroundings. If they discovered any threats, they would immediately inform the people below to lower the iron gate. That was the only way in. Although Zhang Cheng did not want to enter this relatively enclosed fortress, he was tired and sleepy after traveling for an entire night. He had to find a place to eat and sleep. Otherwise, he would collapse before he could find the forgotten potion master. After all, he was not a living dead. He did not need to rest or eat. As a meticulous woman, Sophia undoubtedly noticed the unconcealable tiredness on Zhang Cheng's face. She took the initiative to serve a bowl of soup and placed it in front of him along with a plate full of hard bread. She imitated the tone of a wife to her husband and said, "Here, my dear, eat. After you're done, go to the hammocks and sleep for a while. Don't worry, I'll wake you up if there's any news." "Thank you." Zhang Cheng did not pay attention to this kind of verbal teasing. He picked up the bowl and ate without holding back. About 7 or 8 minutes later, he was full. He got up and lay in the hammock, closing his eyes to rest. Although sleepiness kept coming, he forced himself to stay awake until evening. A young man who was in charge of standing guard rushed in and shouted, "Madam, madam, there was news. 3 kilometers northwest. Our men sent out a distress signal. North. If I remember correctly, that area should be inhabited by snowmen, right?" The female assassin, who had also been resting with her eyes closed, immediately opened her eyes and asked in surprise. The young man nodded vigorously. "That's right. The Yeti had dug a deep cave at the foot of the mountain. As long as they took a small path near the cave, they would be able to reach Taramil. I've already prepared the horses. Would you like to set off now?" "Of course. I don't want to let a big fish escape from under my nose." After saying that, Sophia sat up and tapped Zhang Cheng's nose lightly with her finger. "My dear, get up. I know you haven't slept. We're going out to hunt now." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." I also want to see who invented something that even Grand Mage Anselm Ruinvul praised. Zhang Cheng turned over and left the hammock, his eyes revealing a strong sense of expectation. After some simple preparations, the two quickly rode on war horses that had been fully rested. Before the sky turned completely dark, they found the place where the signal had been released. Sophia carefully searched the ground for a few minutes and quickly found the mark carved on the tree trunk. She raised the corner of her mouth and muttered to herself, "Hee hee, it seems that this little mouse has been targeted by the hounds I released. He won't be able to escape. Is that so? If I were you, I would have a moment of silence for those pitiful hounds. Because the members of the Royal Potioneer Association are not ordinary alchemists. They're a group of dangerous people who can throw out fatal poisons at any time." Before Zhang Cheng could finish speaking, a scream broke the silence of the night. Monster, run. Ha ha, run? Sorry, you won't be able to escape. Obediently become my experimental subjects. No, go away, don't come near me. Following a few painful screams before death, the surroundings quickly returned to tranquility. Bastard, he actually dared to kill my people? Sophia immediately drew her weapon and ran in the direction of the sound. All right, I admit that these hounds were very competent. At least before they were killed, they pointed out the direction for me. Zhang Cheng complained as he urged his warhorse to catch up. The two of them ran for about a few minutes before they finally saw a hellish scene. 6 syndicate bandits had been torn into a bloody mess by a gigantic undead creature that was pieced together from the corpses of mountain lions, snowmen, and grizzly bears. One of the unlucky ones was torn in half at the waist. He was still breathing and was lying on the ground, struggling in pain. The main culprit of the massacre, a forgotten potioneer dressed in a black robe, was pouring a bottle of unknown gray liquid into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, the body of the person who was cut in half expanded rapidly like a balloon and then exploded with a bang. In an instant, bright red blood, internal organs, minced meat, and bones were scattered everywhere. However, the forgotten potioneer seemed to be used to it and complained to himself, "All right, I failed again. Maybe next time I can try a formula with milder effects." Seeing her subordinates die on the spot, Sophia became abnormally furious. She went around from behind and aimed at the back of the forgotten potioneer's heart. Just as she was about to land the fatal blow, the forgotten potioneer suddenly took out a bottle of potion and drank it. In the next second, a golden energy shield appeared around his body. The female assassin's sharp dagger seemed to have hit a hard rock, unable to move forward even an inch. Limited invincibility potion. Zhang Cheng recognized the famous magic potion in the game at a glance. It was favored by countless spell-type players. Chapter 46. Idiot, do you think you can deceive my eyes with this clumsy stealth technique? The forgotten potioneer sneered as he pulled out a dagger that emitted a strange green light and stabbed it towards Sophia's eyes. As the distance was too close, Sophia had no time to dodge. She could only raise her arm in an attempt to block the attack with her bracers. However, the leather could not withstand the piercing of the sharp blade, and blood splattered everywhere. In just a few seconds, the color of the blood changed from bright red to a chilling black. It even emitted a pungent stench. Sophia's expression changed drastically, and she quickly tore off her bracers and sleeves. Gritting her teeth, she used the dagger to cut off all the flesh around the wound. As an experienced assassin, she could tell at a glance how potent the poison was. If she had been any slower, she would have been in danger of losing her life. Seeing fresh blood flowing out of the wound, she heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly used her torn sleeves to wrap around her arm, making a simple tourniquet to prevent her from fainting and going into shock due to excessive blood loss. Of course, even so, she could not use any weapons with her injured arm. In just one round, the forgotten potioneer had displayed his rich battle experience and the many magical potions he carried with him. Apart from that, the undead monster that was pieced together from numerous corpses was not easy to deal with. After roughly assessing the current situation, Zhang Cheng directly jumped down from the horse and stood in front of the other party unhurriedly. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, an important member of the Undercity Royal Pharmacist Association. If you don't mind, can you hand over the research notes and information you carry with you? I promise that as long as you hand over the information on the new plague, you can leave safely." Dalaran Mage, do you think you have the ability to stop me from returning to Terran Mill? The Forgotten Potioneer retorted with disdain. "All right, it seems that the battle just now has made you overconfident. Let me teach you what humility is." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng immediately took out the soul gem and summoned Mel Royas, who was sealed within. Accompanied by the sound of flowing water, in the blink of an eye, a 4-meter-tall water elemental condensed into a relatively fixed form. His original intention was to negotiate and avoid fighting as much as possible. If necessary, he could even make a little exchange. But now, it seemed that the other party had no such intention. In the end, he could only use violence to get what he wanted. Without wasting any time, the moment the water elemental summoning was completed, Zhang Cheng quickly gave the order to attack through the spiritual link. Mel Royas set off a huge wave as he rushed towards the location of the stitched monster. When the huge wave fell from the sky, all the water was immediately frozen into bone-chilling ice under the influence of the cold air. The clumsy undead monster couldn't dodge in time and was hit squarely. It froze on the spot and became a ferocious and terrifying ice sculpture. At the same time, Zhang Cheng didn't stay idle. With a flash, he appeared only a few meters away from the target. With a snap, he released Frost Nova and froze the other party in place. He didn't give the other party any time to react, followed by another icicle. Even though the dead didn't have nerves that felt pain, the severe frostbite still slowed the movements of the Forgotten Apothecary. He wanted to take something out of the satchel at his waist several times, but in the end, he couldn't take it out. The reason was simple. Zhang Cheng used the end of the flint staff in his hand to stab the other party in the chest, causing him to stagger a few steps back. How could a guy who couldn't even maintain a basic balance take out what he wanted? In fact, from the beginning, Zhang Cheng had noticed that the apothecary wasn't a combat profession like a mage or warlock. He relied on all kinds of strange poisons and magic potions to deal with the enemy. Thus, he made up his mind to make full use of his speed advantage and control him as quickly as possible, not giving the other party any chance to use his potions. Obviously, his plan succeeded. The Forgotten Apothecary didn't expect that a mage would flash to his side the moment the battle started. He also didn't expect that the mage would use his staff to stab him instead of casting spells. After all, under normal circumstances, the strategy of the Dalaran mages was to maintain the maximum distance and use spells to slowly kill the enemy while ensuring their own safety. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng was undoubtedly not in this category. His understanding of the mage profession came entirely from the game, from the battles between players. Just as the apothecary was struggling to get up and counterattack, Sophia, who had entered stealth, suddenly left the shadows. She waved her short sword in an extremely elegant manner and cut off 10 of his fingers in less than 2 seconds. Precise, efficient, fatal. The female assassin used her actions to prove that even if she only had one arm left, she was still a target that couldn't be ignored. Without a doubt, without fingers, it was natural that he couldn't hold anything, especially a long and thin potion bottle. However, the apothecary of the Forgotten Apothecary didn't show a trace of nervousness or fear. Instead, he laughed maniacally. "Ha ha, very good, very good. You're the first living person to force me to this extent. Next, I'll let you feel what true despair is." After saying that, he raised his hand, which was dripping with preservative liquid, and stuffed it into his mouth to chew. The disgusting scene was enough to make one throw up their dinner from the previous night. Before Zhang Cheng could react to what had happened, the apothecary's body began to inflate like a balloon, finally turning into a terrifying sutured abomination that was more than 5 meters tall. "How is it? You didn't expect it, did you? I've already modified my body." The huge, sutured abomination laughed sinisterly as it charged forward with heavy steps. "Oh, damn it. You're really crazy. Zhang Cheng's eyes widened, revealing an expression of disbelief. Having seen with his own eyes how this thing used its monstrous strength to drag the arcane water puppet, he had no intention of testing the consequences of being hit by it. He once again used his flash to escape more than 10 meters away. Crazy? No, I'm not crazy. This is art. This is the highest achievement in alchemy. You Dalaran mages don't even know how to appreciate it. The sutured abomination roared as it uprooted a tree and used it as a weapon, smashing it down with force. Boom! Ah! Sophia fell to the ground with a loud sound and soil splattered everywhere, letting out a pitiful cry. Chapter 47. I caught a little mouse. The potioneer who had transformed into an abomination hurriedly grabbed the female assassin's leg that was not broken and lifted her up. Even though Sophia struggled with all her might, trying to break free from the giant palm, it was a pity that her strength was like that of an ant compared to the terrifying strength of the abomination. Even if she continuously stabbed the dagger into the palm, she could not cause any substantial damage. In just a few seconds, the wound was slowly healing under the effects of the shadow energy. As one of the greatest masterpieces of psychic magic, the abomination had extremely strong resistance to physical attacks. As long as the shadow energy in its body was not exhausted, it would slowly recover no matter how severe the injury was. If one wanted to kill them, the best way was to use high-temperature flames to burn them or to cut them into pieces in a short period of time. It would be best to grind them into minced meat. It was obvious that the dagger in Sophia's hand, which was only a foot long, would not be able to do so. Thus, she did not hesitate to shout, "Save me! Quickly save me!" The ferocious and terrifying abomination cracked open its mouth and lightly shook its arm. It laughed as it asked, "This woman is asking you for help. What do you plan to do? Give up and surrender? Or be a selfish and cold mage and give up on her? What do you think?" Zhang Chang glanced at the female assassin who was filled with the desire to live. He did not directly answer her, instead throwing the question back at her. Perhaps it was because he had been standing from the perspective of a bystander from the start, or perhaps it was because he was naturally cold-blooded. In any case, his heart was very calm at this moment. He did not care about Sophia's life or death at all. His mind was filled with thoughts of how to snatch the deerskin backpack filled with information. Me? According to past experience, you selfish mages only care about yourself and do not care about the life or death of others. Of course, if the two of you are lovers, then what will happen next will be very interesting. Did you know? I once caught a pair of young lovers and did a small test on them. Guess what the result was? A trace of undisguised mockery appeared on the ugly face of the abomination. What was the result? Zhang Cheng asked cooperatively. It was very simple. I gave them a bottle of plague potion and let them choose who to drink it. As long as one of them drank it, I would let the other go. In the end, the man did not hesitate to snatch it and drink it first. He fell to the ground in pain and howled. But what about women? The woman didn't even look at him. She turned and ran away. But before she could run 50 meters, the man turned into a ghoul and chased after her to eat her alive. What do you think? Isn't it interesting? In the face of life and death, their so-called love of undying vows instantly reveals its true form. When he was talking about this matter, Abomination's eyes revealed a look of extreme enjoyment. There was no need to ask to know that his heart had long been tortured by some terrifying experience to the point of being twisted and sick. In fact, every forgotten one had a lot of unknown pain and sorrow hidden behind them. Some of them even had to endure the torture brought about by the remnants of their humanity and conscience. As time passed, it was inevitable that they would choose to go to extremes. Just as the pharmacist of the forgotten was expecting to find fear, disgust, panic, and other expressions on Zhang Cheng's face, he suddenly found that Zhang Cheng was looking at him with sympathy. In an instant, a nameless anger rose from the bottom of his heart. He roared crazily, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing. I just suddenly feel that you are very sad." Zhang Cheng shrugged and replied, "Sad? How am I pathetic? I'm a senior member of the Royal Potioneer Association. I have unparalleled power. I only need to move my finger to crush you to death. Abomination waved his thick arms, impatient to prove his strength. Zhang Cheng smiled slightly and said in a very calm tone, "But these are not what your subconscious desires the most. Although I don't know what happened to you when you were alive, one thing is certain. You are jealous of those couples who are passionately in love, and you're trying to find joy in the process of breaking them apart. But in reality, other than tormenting yourself, you don't get the slightest bit of joy. Shut up. Shut your stinky mouth." Abomination was obviously poked at where it hurt, and he used his thick tree trunk to beat him wildly. Zhang Cheng, who was already prepared, would not stand there and wait to be beaten. He quickly retreated from the opponent's attack range and continued to provoke him. What? Did I accidentally guess it right? When the undead calamity descended, the woman you loved so much couldn't have coincidentally abandoned you and run away by herself, right? Kill. I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you. The enraged potioneer threw Sophia aside and rushed over like a moving mountain of flesh. Great. This is the result I wanted. Zhang Cheng's lips curled up, and he muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. Angering his opponent and making him lose his rationality was the result he wanted the most. After all, although abominations were powerful compared to a potioneer with battle experience, they were still easy to deal with. At the very least, he had a few ways to get rid of abominations in his mind. There was no hesitation. When the opponent was about to reach him, Zhang Cheng took the risk of being knocked to death and flashed to the abomination's side. He grabbed the deerskin backpack hanging at his waist and turned around to the side. He took advantage of the fact that Fatty was not nimble in turning and successfully escaped. Just as he returned to a safe place, he immediately shouted at the water elemental beside him, "Mel Royas, cut!" "Yes, master." A large amount of water elemental responded through the spiritual connection. It began to revolve the water around its body at high speed, forming extremely sharp water blades. When it collided with the abomination, the embalming fluid and minced meat splashed everywhere like raindrops. In the blink of an eye, the flesh and blood on the abomination's chest and abdomen were minced, revealing the black heart that was beating nonstop inside. Unlike the hearts of the Forgotten Ones, the surface of the potioneer's heart was densely covered with evil dark runes. It was through the power of these runes that he was able to support such a large body. Zhang Cheng grasped the opportunity and successfully released a bone-piercing frost arrow, piercing through the heart on the spot. Large amounts of black blood spurted out 2 meters away from the wound. When the spurting blood slowly decreased until it was only flowing slowly, the mutated potioneer finally returned to normal. Chapter 48. The cold wind of the night blew through the forest, carrying away the thick smell of blood in the air. A few coyotes appeared out of nowhere and wandered around the area. It was obvious that they were attracted by the corpse and wanted to see if they could get some supper. Zhang Cheng ignored the hungry beasts and the female assassin who was lying on the ground in a deep coma. He impatiently opened his backpack and took out the thick notebook to quickly flip through it. He only let out a long sigh of relief when he confirmed that it recorded the research process and formula of the new plague. Phew! I finally got it. My time and energy were not wasted. As soon as he said that, a small crystal bottle that emitted strong arcane light suddenly appeared in his hand. It was so bright and dazzling that he could feel the pure energy contained in the violet liquid even through the bottle. Although he had already guessed what this small bottle was, Zhang Cheng still habitually took out the mysterious parchment scroll and glanced at it, only to see the words written on it. Mission: New plague completed. Level of contribution: high. Reward: 1 bottle of unpolluted Sunwell water. It can be used to create a small mana source, or can be directly absorbed to transform your body. So this is the Sunglass Well water. I seem to understand why the High Elves went crazy when they lost it. Zhang Cheng murmured to himself as he stared at the mesmerizing halo emitting from the bottle. As a mage, he could not imagine how someone who was used to drawing power from such a pure energy source would be able to tolerate energy full of impurities. It was like a person who breathed in the clean, high-oxygen air of the forest all year round and suddenly came to a heavily polluted city one day. Perhaps his entire respiratory system would have problems. Obviously, the high L's were used to the pure energy of the sun well and gradually developed the problem of being delicate and expensive. After losing the sun well, many people could not adapt to absorbing magic from nature through normal means and finally developed a so-called magic addiction. Zhang Cheng dared to guarantee that if he completely absorbed the sunwell water in the bottle a few times, he would also develop a strong magic addiction that would take a long time to subside. After much hesitation, he finally gave up the tempting idea of directly absorbing and transforming his body. He carefully kept the bottle close to his body, intending to create a small magic power source after he left. After all, until now, he was still not sure if the magical energy of Azeroth was compatible with the familiar yet unfamiliar Earth. If it was incompatible, it meant that there was no way to recover mana through normal means. They could only rely on small energy sources to replenish their mana. If they used it now, it would be a tragedy. As the saying goes, a man without foresight is bound to have immediate worries. He didn't want to wait until something went wrong before he started regretting. After storing away the precious sun well water, Zhang Qing finally remembered the heavily injured female assassin. He hurriedly used flame impact to kill the coyote that was trying to rush up and bite her. He helped her sit up and poured a small bottle of beginner healing potion into her mouth. At the same time, he untied the tourniquet around his arm. Otherwise, his entire arm would be in danger of being crippled. In just a few seconds, the wound that was still slowly bleeding had miraculously coagulated. Although it had not scabbed yet, there was no need to worry about excessive blood loss leading to death. As for the severely fractured and deformed calf, he didn't dare to move it at all, in case he accidentally caused a second injury. He only broke 2 branches to fix it, then took out a teleportation rune and concentrated on guiding the arcane energy. About a minute later, the rune tore through space and opened a magic portal to Dalaran. Zhang Cheng quickly dismissed the summoned water elemental and carried Sophia through, leaving the stitched monster frozen in the ice alone in its original place. Anyway, without the control of the necromancy spell, it was not a threat at all. It would not take long for it to slowly rot with the passage of time. Since passing the Kirin Tor Council's assessment, Zhang Cheng had obtained a right to use the teleportation hall. As long as he consumed a rune, he could return to Dalaran from any corner of the world of Azeroth. Of course, the price of the teleportation rune was not cheap, and it had to meet certain conditions. For example, the destination of the teleportation had to consume a lot of money and manpower, build a stable energy source that could support the teleportation gate, and complex magic protection so that when the forceful tearing of space caused serious consequences, it could react in time. In the entire Alliance area, only Dalaran, Stormwind City, Ironforge, and Darnassus could perform ultra-long distance teleportation. In particular, Darnassus, who had always opposed the abuse of magic, finally reluctantly agreed after the repeated urging of several other races. As soon as the 2 of them appeared in the teleportation hall, the mage on duty waiting here immediately took 2 steps forward and routinely asked, "Young mage, please report your name and explain who this woman is. I have to make a record. Sorry, I have an urgent matter and have to see Master Ansram Ruinvawal immediately. Can the record be made up later?" Zhang Cheng deliberately put on a dignified face. He didn't want to explain to a guy he didn't know how he got involved with a female syndicate assassin. Go to see Master Ansram Ruinvawal. The mage on duty raised his eyebrows in surprise. He obviously didn't believe it. Yes, I have the information he urgently needs. If too much time is wasted because of the registration, you have to be responsible. The mage on duty hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded helplessly. Well, if it's true, then you can make an exception and don't have to register. I'll ask Master Archmage for confirmation later. Go ahead. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders indifferently and walked out of the teleportation hall quickly. After a while, he came to the entrance of the tower. Just like last time, after expressing his intention to the arcane puppet, he quickly entered the top of the tower unimpeded. Ansram Ruinvawal, who had been waiting for a long time, did not talk nonsense. As soon as they met, he asked directly, "How is it? Did you get the information about the new plague?" "Yes, it's all here." Zhang Cheng threw the deerskin backpack on the table. The Archmage's eyes lit up. He took out the notes in the backpack and looked at them carefully. After half an hour, he touched his chin and exclaimed, "Incredible! It's incredible! The pharmacists of the Forgotten have tested more than 2,000 kinds of toxins extracted from animals and plants, and combined them repeatedly to achieve different effects. The content inside is very important and precious. You did a good job. Later, I'll ask Charles to make you a protection badge as a reward. Now go and rest. I'll let someone else handle the finishing work." After that, Ansram Ruinvawal ignored Zhang Cheng and began to fiddle with the bottles and jars on the alchemy table. He never looked at the female assassin from beginning to end. Chapter 49. It had to be said that the Archmage's indifferent attitude made Zhang Cheng secretly relieved. He quickly sent the female assassin to the Holy Light Chapel and entrusted her to a gentle and beautiful female priestess. Then, he left and hurried back to his residence. Because just after he handed over the information of the new plague to Ansram Ruinvawal, the parchment gave a countdown of 48 hours. This also meant that the short trip to Azeroth was coming to an end. He had to finish what he needed to do within 2 days. Otherwise, he didn't know if he would be able to come back after leaving. Since he came here, he hadn't slept well. Staying up late and eating irregular meals were common. His body and spirit were already very tired. The dark circles around his eyes were comparable to national treasures, and the heavy bags under his eyes were proof that if he didn't get a good rest soon, sudden death was definitely not a joke. But in order to gain more knowledge and power, he still chose to drink a bottle of refreshing magic potion and continued to go into the basement to complete the summoning and imprisonment of the other 3 elements. With the help of Meroas, the fire elemental Sassos, the earth elemental Sethine, and the wind elemental Vera quickly became Zhang Cheng's. After putting away the soul gemstone, he immediately ran to the old mage Charles and took a defensive badge. The function of this thing was to allow the wearer to activate an energy shield when needed, which could resist all damage, including magic and physical attacks. According to the game, it should be an accessory and would not conflict with the magic ring. It might save lives at a critical moment. After all the key things were done, he finally ran to the library and borrowed all the books and notes that he was interested in or that he might use in the future. He was going to take them away to study and learn slowly. As for the problem of returning, he didn't know if he could come back after leaving. So to put it bluntly, it was borrowing but not returning. Just like that, a busy and fulfilling 48 hours passed. The moment the countdown reached 0000, Zhang Cheng and his luggage were shrouded in an indescribably terrifying energy. Then the next second, the space was brutally torn apart, forming a terrible void vortex. The scene in front of him was completely different from normal magic teleportation. The latter was to open a short and narrow passage through precise positioning. It would not affect the space itself too much, but the former, well, to use an inappropriate analogy, if the latter was a small wooden stick with a length of 10 centimeters and the diameter of 2 fingers, then the latter was the concrete electropoles on both sides of the road. Just think about it. If they all fell from a high altitude at the same time, how big of a difference would the damage to the ground be? Obviously, the latter was more than 10,000 times more destructive than the former. Archimond, the Corruptor's portal into Azeroth, was probably at this level. Just a few seconds after the vortex formed, Zhang Cheng was suddenly sucked in by a huge suction force. Without the passage of time, without any visible reference, there was only endless chaos. He couldn't use words to describe what he saw, and he wasn't even sure if he was dead or alive. He didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been a few seconds, or it could have been a few hundred years. When he was about to be driven crazy by all kinds of bizarre thoughts and ideas that appeared in his mind, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up in front of him. When he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find that he had returned from the basement of Dalaran's house to the slums of Brooklyn, New York. What was more interesting was that not far in front of him were two werewolves with hands full of blood. They were still lying on the ground, sniffing around, as if looking for new prey. In order to confirm his guess, Zhang Cheng hurriedly raised his head and looked at the electronic clock hanging in front of the shop across the street. The time was exactly midnight. This meant that, according to the time on Earth, he had only left for about a second, and the werewolves who were chasing him had not gone too far. Interesting. Is the flow of time different in the two worlds, or is there some kind of mysterious force that has frozen the time in this world? Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. He put down his carry-on luggage and walked slowly toward the location of the werewolves. There was no need to ask to know that they must be seeking revenge for being hunted down. As a young man who thought highly of himself, he didn't mind being an honest coward when he didn't have the power. But now that he had gained the power, he naturally had to settle the score. Especially the damn werewolves, they had almost killed him twice. If he didn't give them a memorable lesson, how could he vent his anger? But before Zhang Cheng made the first move, the werewolves with a keen sense of smell discovered him. They immediately turned around and let out a howl, opened their bloody mouths, and charged. Dominated by their bestial instincts, they didn't realize that the young man in front of them was no longer a prey, but a terrifying hunter. You're looking for death. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and sneered. Soon, a bright flame appeared on his hand. When the two werewolves rushed into the narrow alley together, he suddenly raised his arm and made a fist. Boom! Accompanied by a violent sound and explosion, a scorching wall of fire immediately engulfed the front part of the alley. As for the two ferocious werewolves, they immediately fell to the ground and rolled around, trying to put out the flames on their bodies. But unfortunately, the flaming storm created by magic wasn't an ordinary flame and couldn't be extinguished by ordinary means. Moreover, the thick hair on the werewolves became the ideal burning material. No matter how they rolled around, it was useless. Looking at his enemies struggling in pain, Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a cruel glint. He raised his staff and began to summon a blizzard, using hailstones to ravage the werewolves. Obviously, he wasn't in a hurry to kill the two werewolves. Instead, he wanted to torture them and make them feel extreme pain. With the powerful battle strength provided by the mage template, not to mention two low-level werewolves, even a pure-blooded werewolf noble would find it difficult to gain any advantage. Even though the werewolves had extraordinary self-recovery abilities, under the repeated ravages of ice and fire, they quickly fell to the brink of death. They tried several times to escape the area of effect, but after running a few steps, they were frozen in place by frost nova. Just as Zhang Cheng was enjoying the thrill of revenge, a blonde beauty wearing a low-cut, backless evening gown slowly walked out from the corner. Chapter 50. Dear Zhang, I knew you weren't an ordinary person, but I didn't expect you to be a sorcerer. Catherine stepped over the two dying werewolves in her 10-inch red high heels. Her snow-white, slender calves contrasted sharply with the bloody wounds on their bodies. Just as one of the werewolves was about to scratch her right foot, the sorceress with terrifying supernatural powers suddenly raised her right hand and made a waving motion. The poor werewolf was instantly sent flying by an invisible force. He fell from a high place and stabbed into the sharp metal pillar at the top of the street lamp. Dark red blood flowed down the side of the pillar. After twitching for a few seconds, the werewolf breathed his last. Even though it wasn't the first time he saw her use her telekinesis, Zhang Cheng still felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. Maybe it was a natural fear of things he didn't understand, or maybe it was a psychological trauma from before. In short, he immediately stopped casting and probed with an uncertain tone. You've been following me all this time? Haha, do you think I'm a woman who would do such a boring thing? Catherine asked with a faint smile. Zhang Cheng thought for a moment and immediately shook his head. No, you wouldn't. Based on your personality, if you wanted to do something to me, you would have done it when we first met. There's no need to wait until now. Smart. Catherine's eyes flashed with a hint of praise. Actually, I had a date nearby. When I heard the screams, I rushed over to see what happened. No matter what, these streets are under my jurisdiction. How can I allow a few werewolves to do as they please? Your jurisdiction? Zhang Cheng keenly grasped the keyword. Even though he had been on this earth for more than a month, it didn't mean that he understood the rules of this world. To be precise, he didn't have the right to understand. He didn't have any power at that time. He only observed carefully during his spare time, while washing dishes, and then speculated a little bit of information. In addition, Catherine's Kiss was a restaurant on the surface, but it was actually divided into two parts. The above-ground part was for ordinary people to eat, and the underground part was for superhumans and monsters to gather. Zhang Cheng was once lucky enough to go in, but he almost became the snack of a thirsty female vampire. Since then, he did not dare to walk around. He stayed in the kitchen obediently and never stepped out. After work, he quickly went home and locked the doors and windows. Otherwise, he would die in less than a month. Catherine obviously didn't know that someone was silently criticizing her restaurant. She smiled and nodded proudly. Of course, there were 22 districts in Brooklyn, and each district had a designated person in charge. I happened to be one of them, and I was in charge of managing daily affairs and dealing with all kinds of unexpected situations, especially those bastards who like to run amok. What? As an adept, you don't even know this. Parliament? Dividing the regions? Deal with daily affairs? Zhang Cheng instantly realized that these mysterious forces hidden under the water were not as scattered as he thought. Instead, they had formed a complicated governing structure. But it was not strange when he thought about it. If there was no strong force to suppress them, with the speed and keen senses of the great American uncrowned kings, the television would have been filled with all kinds of news about supernatural forces and monsters. After figuring this out, he touched his chin thoughtfully. After about 2 or 3 minutes, he pretended to be troubled and explained, "Sorry, I used to live in a place where there were no traces of people. I just came to America recently, and I don't know what's going on here. Also, because of a magic accident a while ago, I was temporarily unable to cast spells, so I didn't have time to ask for your advice." If I'm not wrong, the so-called accident you're talking about should be the unexpected teleportation a month ago, right? As she said that, Catherine suddenly stretched out her right hand with a black lace glove and gently pressed it on Zhang Cheng's chest. Perhaps in the eyes of many, this action was very much like a hint of lust between a man and a woman. But Zhang Cheng was very clear that this had nothing to do with lust at all. Instead, it was a naked threat. If he denied it, then the werewolf's corpse hanging on the street lamp would be the best example. Out of caution, he did not immediately do anything extreme. Instead, he replied with a calm face, "Yes, I was accidentally teleported to New York. I didn't expect you to investigate so thoroughly." "Of course I have to investigate. Otherwise, why would I protect you? I'm a witch, and witches only do things that are beneficial to them. Now that you have recovered your strength, I want you to repay this favor according to the contract of protection." Catherine did not waste any time and directly put forward her request. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you explain it in detail?" Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. He did not expect that he would have to pay a price for accepting the other party's protection. "Damn it, don't tell me you really ran out from some desolate place? You haven't even heard of the contract of protection?" Catherine held her forehead and complained helplessly. But complaining was just complaining. In the end, she patiently explained, the contract of protection was announced in 1862 when the Parliament was just established in the United States. Simply put, when a person or creature is threatened, they can choose to temporarily rely on a party for protection. When the crisis is over and they want to leave, they have to repay something of equivalent value. Maybe it's money, maybe it's a treasure, maybe it's a promise. Do you understand? I see. Then what kind of price do you want me to pay? Zhang Cheng directly opened the negotiation mode. There was no doubt that he did not like to owe debts, especially debt of gratitude that could not be seen or touched. So, the sooner he paid it off, the better. It's very simple. I want to have you. Catherine's eyes revealed a strong desire for possession. Have me? Do you mean you want me to pledge my loyalty to you? Or do you want me to provide you with some special services? If it's the former, then I'm sorry, I have no interest in pledging my loyalty to anyone. If it's the latter, I can agree immediately. Zhang Chung narrowed his eyes, and his whole body emitted a dangerous aura. As a person who was used to being free, he did not want to be anyone's servant, even if the other party was a beautiful witch with great power. However, Catherine did not seem to be angry at all. She still calmly spread out her hands and comforted him. Relax, my dear, relax. I think you misunderstood me. I don't want you to be my servant. I just want you to register your identity in my jurisdiction. As for the special services. Chapter 51. Registered identity? What's in it for you? In addition, some things can't be judged by appearance. You have to try it for yourself. Zhang Chung quickly glanced at the other's almost perfect body and said with a double meaning. Knowing that the witch didn't want to restrict his personal freedom, he immediately let down his guard and began to defend his dignity as a man. After all, as long as a man was physically and mentally healthy, he wouldn't be indifferent when the opposite sex questioned his ability, let alone admit that he couldn't. Catherine smiled and shook her right index finger. No, you don't understand what I mean, and you don't understand what a witch's desire means. You should know that the last guy who was full of confidence almost lost his life before the foreplay even started. If you really have the guts, we can find time to try it out. Don't worry, I'll try my best to control myself. I won't suck you dry. As for the benefits, of course there are many, but I won't say too much here. Come to the restaurant tomorrow morning. I'll let Kars make a detailed explanation. Okay, then see you tomorrow. Zhang Chung was also a little tired and urgently needed to go back to the apartment to have a good sleep, so he readily agreed to the other's arrangement. No matter what, since he wanted to survive in this world, the witch in front of him was indeed a good entry point. At least compared to taking a huge risk to deal with people he didn't know, it was better to find someone he was slightly familiar with. Good night, my little wizard. I hope you have a good dream tonight. Oh, right. Remember, if the police come to the door, don't say anything. Just keep silent. I'll send a lawyer to deal with it. After that, Catherine tiptoed and kissed Zhang Cheng's cheek, turned around, and directly pinched the remaining werewolf to death, and then slowly disappeared at the end of the dark alley. Feeling the lingering warmth on his face, Zhang Chung breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around and picked up the luggage that was thrown in the corner. He dragged his tired body back to the apartment. Without even taking a shower, he went straight to bed and fell asleep. Just as he fell asleep, the witch returned to her restaurant, or rather, her stronghold. Kars, who had been waiting for a long time, hurriedly took 2 steps forward and hung the coat handed over by the hostess on the hanger. He asked with a smile, "Madam, how was it? Did the negotiation go smoothly?" "Yes, it went quite smoothly. Ramsey has already agreed to work with us to thoroughly investigate the werewolves in our jurisdiction. We'll eliminate that bastard hiding in the shadows and causing chaos before the council notices the problem. No matter who he is or what ulterior motives he has offended the wrong person this time." Catherine did not hide the anger in her heart and directly sentenced the mastermind to death. "May the gods have mercy on you. Your enemy is an idiot who doesn't even know how big of a mistake he has made." Kars gently stroked the ring engraved with a skull, a bloodthirsty expression appearing on his wrinkled face. Although this old man usually maintained an amiable appearance to the ordinary staff in the restaurant, in reality, as a witch doctor proficient in curses, he had killed at least 100 or 200 people. Catherine, of course, knew how cruel and merciless her loyal servant could be. She casually kicked off the high heels on her feet and sat on the sofa. She said with a slightly playful tone, "Don't worry, Kars. I promise you will get enough souls this time. Also, guess who I met on my way back?" "Who?" The old man bent down to pick up the shoes and carefully place them in the cabinet. "It's Zhang. His real identity is actually a magus. I saw with my own eyes that he controlled the power of fire and frost and ravaged 2 werewolves to the brink of death." After saying that, Catherine took a sip of red wine from her glass and very lazily put her feet on the table. "Oh, is that true? Unbelievable. A magus actually washed dishes in our kitchen for more than half a month." Kars was obviously shocked and stood there with his mouth agape. Even in a world filled with all kinds of mysterious powers, magi were a rare and special talent. A magus washing dishes in a restaurant was basically the same as an excellent graduate from a famous university working as a professional beggar on a roadside. It was the kind of news that would make the headlines. The more interesting part is yet to come. Did you know? He claimed that he had always lived in a place where there were no traces of humans and had never even heard of the existence of the Parliament, let alone understand the various rules of the underground world. Simply put, he is a complete newbie. Carr stroked his thick beard and muttered to himself, "A young magus who knows nothing about our world? That's not a funny joke." Catherine gave a non-committal smile and raised her head to finish the red wine in her glass. She licked her alluring red lips and said, "I don't care if he's pretending to be a fool or if he has ulterior motives. As long as he can be used by me, it's fine. I believe you should be very clear that Counselor Miles' life is about to come to an end. When the time comes, the 22 Lords of Brooklyn will use the war game to decide on a new leader. That's why I need manpower, a lot of manpower. Understood. I will recruit a strong army for you and take back the authority that originally belonged to you." Carr knelt on one knee and promised with an incomparably solemn tone, "Very good. Go and prepare. Once I become the new counselor, you can begin your revenge plan." Catherine also reassured her loyal servant, "Thank you for your kindness and generosity. I swear that I will definitely help you reach the peak of power. Then let us work together and slowly remove the obstacles that are blocking our path forward. As for Zhang, I still have to give him a little test to make sure that he's not a spy sent by the opponent." While saying this, Catherine's eyes flashed with a cold light, as if she was hinting at something. Kars was very clear about the meaning behind his master's words, and immediately suggested with a smile, "Madam, I just have an idea. Why don't we let him participate in this operation to exterminate the werewolves?" "Him? Yes. Think about it. Normally, if a young magus who knows nothing almost died twice in the hands of the werewolves, how would he react after finding the mastermind behind the scenes? Interesting. You want to observe his reaction and determine if he's lying. That's right. No matter what his motive is, as long as we are prepared, there's nothing to worry about. If that's the case, then go and make the arrangements. He'll come to the dining hall tomorrow morning. I believe that with your experience, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with him. Remember, before the war game ends, I want to see a magus alive. Understood? As you wish, madam." Chapter 52. Early in the morning, when the star called the sun slowly rose from the sea level, bringing light and heat back to the earth, the people living in New York ushered in a brand new day. Of course, for the police officers in charge of public security in the slums, it was an extremely irritating day, because every morning they would receive a lot of reports, some of which were about robberies or burglaries, some of which were sexual assaults that happen all the time, and even more serious were shootings and murders. In short, in this area full of poverty, violence, and crime, anything could happen. Many experienced detectives even developed the habit of not eating breakfast so that they wouldn't be able to stop themselves from vomiting when they saw some shocking scene. Don't think that this was a joke. Because of the extreme repression in their lives, many residents had a terrifying beast hidden in their hearts. With the slightest provocation, they would immediately turn into perverted murderers. As usual, Clive pushed open the door and walked into the police station while gnawing on a hot dog he bought from a roadside stall. He waved at his partner and greeted, "Good morning, Elena. So, where are we going this morning?" As an old detective who had worked for more than 10 years, he had long seen all kinds of tragic crime scenes, and his nerves had become far more tenacious than the average person's. Even in the face of an open corpse, he could still eat without batting an eyelid. Damn it. Sometimes I really envy your good appetite. Here, this is the case that the director sent down. Take a look. It makes me not want to eat lunch. As she spoke, a capable woman in her early 30s threw the files in her hands onto the table. New case? Don't we already have 6 unsolved murders on our hands? Clive frowned and stuffed the hot dog into his mouth in a few bites, then opened the file and quickly flipped through it. In just a few seconds, he was stunned by the horrible faces. He couldn't help but cry out, "Oh my God, this is simply crazy." Could it be that there's a lunatic in our district? Are there any witnesses? What did the forensic doctor say? The woman called Elena, shook her head, and replied, "There are no witnesses for the time being." As for the result given by the forensic doctor, the 3 bodies belonged to 2 young white males and 1 young white female. They are all between the ages of 16 to 20. The latter died of suffocation due to her trachea being bitten off while she was still alive. The former had severe burns and frostbite marks on her body, but the cause of death was a sharp weapon piercing through her heart. In addition, our forensic doctor also found the muscle tissue of the female victim from the gaps between the teeth of the 2 men. You mean the 2 male victims bit the female victim to death and then were killed by another pervert? Clive asked, dumbfounded. *T. Don't ask me. How I know the answer? Anyway, according to the forensic test results, the thing that bit the female victim's throat was definitely not a human. It should be some kind of large canine. Elena rolled her eyes in annoyance. Clive sighed helplessly. Sigh. Okay, this case is getting more and more bizarre. Why don't we go to the crime scene and investigate first? Just as Elena was about to say something, a police officer rushed over with a printed photo and shouted, "Hey, guys, guess what I found from the nearby surveillance video?" "Cut the crap. Let me see." Clive grabbed the printed photo without any explanation and found that there were 2 very blurry black shadows chasing an Asian youth. Because the light was too dim and the distance was a bit far, it was impossible to clearly identify the appearance and physical characteristics. They could only roughly determine the height and clothing. "This photo is blurry. Can't your technical department make it clearer?" Elena complained, rather dissatisfied. "This has already been processed. In the initial image, let alone clothing, we can't even see the figure clearly," the police officer explained innocently. "Forget it. Compared to before when we had no clue, at least we now know that there is a living witness, right? Let's go. Let's go to the crime scene and ask around. Anyway, there are definitely not many people who fit the 2 criteria of getting off work at midnight and being young Asian. We can find him after a little screening." The experienced Clive immediately found a breakthrough from the blurry photo. Under his suggestion, the 2 quickly drove the police car and began to ask around along the street. In just 2 or 3 hours, they locked onto the target. The target was none other than Zhang Cheng, who was still sleeping on the bed. He didn't even realize that a big trouble had come to the door. Bang, bang, bang. With the sound of the door being slammed, Zhang Cheng suddenly opened his eyes and woke up. Out of a recent habit, he didn't immediately ask, let alone open the door. Instead, he carefully observed the movement outside through the peephole. As a result, he didn't know until he saw it, but he was shocked. Although Elena and Clive were wearing plain clothes, the bulging holsters on their waists and the cooperative attitude of the apartment manager were enough to prove their identity. "Police. Oh, this isn't good." Zhang Cheng's mouth twitched as he muttered in a low voice. He then turned around and stuffed all the luggage in the corner into the closet at an extremely fast speed. After all, once the police broke in, his trouble wouldn't be as simple as being involved in a murder case. It would also include being an illegal resident, hiding a large amount of gold and jewelry of unknown origin, and so on. After taking care of everything, he took a deep breath and pretended to be sleepy as he asked loudly, "Who is it?" "Hello, sir. We're detectives from the NYPD. We hope you can answer a few questions." Elena straightforwardly revealed her identity. "Police? What happened?" Zhang Cheng pretended to be surprised and opened the door. "Last night, in an alley about 300 meters away from the apartment, there was a murder case. We hope you can cooperate with the investigation and find the murderer as soon as possible." As Clive spoke, he looked up and down at the young man in front of him and compared him with the blurry photo in his mind. He immediately confirmed that this was the witness he was looking for. However, he didn't immediately expose Zhang Cheng's performance. Instead, he exchanged a look with his partner.